coming to you from Alabama. We should have been in the national championship, and this is going to be about 2 weeks old, or a week old, right, by the time we post this. But that's all the talk on social media is Alabama. It should have just been Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly proud, even if I wasn't an Alabama fan my whole life, I am now.
Yeah.
And rooting for them to be the preseason #1 next year.
Yeah.
And go up against Texas is going to be good because they're going to have the Manning boy.
Mm-hmm.
And Colorado's going to be good with Coach Prime there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that.
So I know that my guest is a college football fan, Drew Gilbert.
Yeah.
He's in the house. How you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Good. You live in Harvest.
Yeah, well, I live in Madison now.
Yeah,
live in Harvest for a while. Yeah, moved to Madison recently. So,
now, so Drew is interesting because in episode 35, we interviewed Jessica Brown from First Stop, and that is your main job at First Stop, which is kind of meeting the homeless where they're at. It's not a homeless shelter, right? It's trying to provide services to them, and there's some great things going on with First Stop right now, including I think yesterday they had laid the foundation for the new facility. Yeah. So if we're not going to probably go into too much about First Stop today because I really want to talk to you about what you do as in EMS.
Yeah.
And because you were a chief, right? For
used to be a chief. I'm a captain with Harvest Volunteer Fire Department. That's correct. Yeah.
I guess I was thinking about maybe your prior employment where you were at the rescue mission.
Yeah.
You were over EMS there.
Yeah. Well, I was over emergency services there, so that kind of entailed the shelters, security. We had a medical wing, so it was kind of multiple different things. But that was where I really got my EMT license was when I was working there, and that was just because of a whole host of medical issues we were having, just dealing with clientele that you deal with over there. So
right,
and that's been useful at First Stop too. So I mean, it does kind of bleed over a little bit. So
yeah, well, actually, we won't do it now, but we will. Within the last month. You used your skills with something that happened at First Stop, but let's not spoil it.
Okay.
we'll get back to that. But so let's start with First Stop though, and just talk about kind of what you do.
Yeah.
And then I want to transition away from that.
Okay.
Because I do think that Jessica and I did a pretty good job. Of going into that, and we showed a lot of the footage that you guys have on your website and how they do some fundraising, and we talked about Shower Up, and things like that. So. Let's talk about First Stop, though, and what your responsibility is there.
Yeah. So I'm the assistant director at First Stop. So really, my primary responsibilities are over the day center that we have set up, which is just for homeless people to come to during the day to get services. So that's food, Shower Up, like you talked about, laundry, and then they can come in there and do some walk-in case management, and then really get set up with appointments with the other case managers at our modular building on our other property. And then I'm over the outreach team. So that's 2 case managers and some other multidisciplinary people that come out to the camps with us. So there's a therapist from Wellstone and sometimes some other groups that come. But we got to the homeless camps. So the groups that either don't or can't come to First Stop, we'll go out there and kind of meet them where they are, remove barriers from people, and try to get them the help that they need.
You just mentioned something that I hadn't really thought of until episode 30 when I interviewed Cynthia Parker. Actually, I don't know if it was 30. I might. It was 40. From the National Children's Advocacy Center, and they talked about multidisciplinary teams. And you just kind of touched on it. So, what is the full complement of the agencies and services that make up that team?
Yeah. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed since I've been at First Stop, is kind of putting that team together. So I started at First Stop a little over a year ago. And so that was one of the main focuses, was setting this team up to go to the homeless camps. It's something that had not been done in Huntsville before. So like I said, with us, we have a therapist from Wellstone that comes out with us. She is there to really get people connected to Wellstone. So to figure out if they're a client there, figure out what maybe barriers they have that's preventing them from going back to Wellstone. And then they have some very neat resources that they can do in the field. So they've got some good connections, as they can do a lot of telehealth things out in the field. So sometimes it doesn't even require the person going to Wellstone. They can handle most of that stuff remotely while she's out there with us.
Okay.
And so then the other partnership that we have is with Huntsville Hospital with the mobile medical unit. So the guy that runs that, I've known him for a while. He helped me set up what we were calling the medical wing at the mission. They still have it going there, but they bring their mobile medical unit out. Last year, when one of the larger homeless camps was still open, he was coming out to the camp with us and setting up out there. We were doing health screenings, vaccines. There was a bad Hep A outbreak right before I started, so that was one thing that we addressed, was getting vaccines out to people that needed them. And then when that camp shut down, there wasn't really a good location to do that stuff in the field, so he started setting up with us over at the day center, and they've done some work over at Rosa Sharon. And so Rosa Sharon's another partnership that we have. They don't come out to the camps with us, but we go over to their location. They're kind of they're a soup kitchen, but there's a lot of people that just hang out over there during the day that are homeless. So we kind of use them to get people to their building. And once they're there, we'll come over and do the case management or do the other portions that we need to. And so those are kind of our main partners. We work very closely with the City of Huntsville Community Development Department. They have a representative that comes out with us pretty much every time we go out to the camps, and we have a pretty good relationship with HPD. They now have 2 homeless officers that are like homeless resource officers that come out, and so they've been set up with really focusing on the law enforcement portion of the homeless problem, but also being out there with us just to kind of show some solidarity and show people that, it's not always that they're coming out there to arrest people or hem somebody up. I mean, they're invested in what people are struggling with, and they want to help. And then we've had just the regular community resource officers with HPD that come out with us, and for the same reasons, just to get to know the population that's out there and see how they can connect people to us, but then also they're there sometimes to put some pressure on them to say, hey, look, what you're doing is illegal. We want to make sure that you get set up on the right track in life. And so they're there to sometimes just kind of be that pressure to get people to really see, how serious the situation can be.
What's on the mobile medical unit that goes out to the camps? Is it some of it also just preventative care? Are they getting physicals?
Oh, yeah.
Just checking their vitals, as well as, I guess, there's some acute cases and then maybe even those that have something chronic and they're getting treatment? Yeah,
they do. So the MMU does everything. They've got a pharmacy with a pharmacist in the bus that comes out. They've got just about any medication that somebody would need, they're able to fill on site with the pharmacist.
Okay.
They've got a couple of physicians that come out with them, and then they've got a couple of residents that come out with those physicians. So, they're in school to be a doctor, but they get to come out and they get to practice. And so that's been a unique relationship to get some of them involved. But yeah, I mean, you can come to the bus and it's basically like going to your family doctor. If you've got something wrong, they can get you treated. If they see something that's very concerning, they'll usually recommend that we get that person to the ER, and they'll try to get them stabilized at Huntsville Hospital. And then once they're discharged, the med bus will follow up with them the next month and kind of see what's going on and go from there. So it's a beautiful thing. I mean, they are able to really have a family doctor almost that they weren't able to have before. And some of them that haven't had a doctor in decades. I mean, literally decades, they've not seen a doctor, and they're able to do that with them coming out with us.
And is that 100% funded by the hospital?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They don't, we don't have to pay anything. Nobody else has to pay anything. That's part of what they've got worked out with their foundation there at the hospital. And so that's all something that they handle internally. But yeah, they come out and do free healthcare out there for people. And it's a big resource.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So what, let's just step back one click, because you were at the Downtown Rescue Mission before that.
Yeah.
What prompted you to seek employment at First Stop?
Jennifer Geist, our executive director, we had worked together at the mission a little bit before she went to First Stop. And so, she was over there and had just said that she was starting up this outreach department. It was new to First Stop, and like I said, pretty new to the city. Nobody was really doing what we were striving to do. I like a challenge, like a new opportunity. And so she called me up one day and said that she was starting that, and it sounded like something that I'd be interested in doing. And so she kind of took off from there. So
yeah. And how excited are you about this new facility?
I'm pretty excited. It's been, our old building was very small. So me and another guy that I work with, we've pretty much shared an office the entire, year plus that we've both been at First Stop. And then now we're kind of working between the day center and between the modular building at the 206 property. So I'm just kind of living out of a bag and working out of a bag every day. So I'll be pretty excited for my own, personal reasons, having an office to work out of one day.
Yeah.
But it'll be cool to see just the room that we have for all of our clients. That was one of the big struggles at the old building, was we just didn't have enough room for staff or for clients. So that'll be a big change. And we'll also have some built-in rooms for some of these partnerships that we have with Wellstone and with Thrive and with Huntsville Hospital, where they'll be able to actually come in and do some of those things in the building. So it'll be a little bit more permanent for everybody, which will be good.
Are you having any thoughts at this stage, even though it's not built, like it's going to need to be bigger? Like we're just becoming more impactful in the community, maybe being more well known. There's more demand for the services you provide. Is there any concern there?
I mean, it's always going to need to be bigger. Yeah. You know, when I was at the rescue mission, they built the Owens House Women's Building while I was there, and you know, it was built for almost double what we were seeing at the time, as far as like the women go that were staying there. And within the first year of it being built, or maybe the first 2 years, it was already at capacity. Yeah. And so I mean, I think it'll always be that way. I mean, like you said, it's people know it's there; they'll come to it. But I think also just with the growing homeless population in Huntsville, you know, it'll probably need to be expanded at some point in the future, I'm sure. So
yeah, and I think that's the one big takeaway from episode 35 with Jessica is on the other side of it, right? For those that do have a home and have shelter and have a job, and we're all excited about Huntsville's growth, and it's the number one place to live. The reality, though, is that your homeless population will increase. Yeah. In proportion with that. And yeah. I refer people to the website and some of the videos you guys have, and there's a great video that Activate did for you all, where Tommy Battle and other leaders, right, in the community are interviewed, and I think it comes up at least twice. Yeah. Of trying to meet the homeless, the needs. Yeah. Right. They come with the growing city. Yeah.
I mean, it's wild. We're seeing new people every day, whether it's at the day center or at the camps that, you know, we've never seen before. And I've been around the homeless population, you know, for almost 10 years at this point. So yeah, there's a lot of people that are at the camps that I've known for almost that whole time. And then there's a lot of people, though, that even being at First Stop, that these are new clients that we've never seen before, that have either come up here for a better opportunity and they didn't necessarily find it the way they thought they would, or it's people that are just newly homeless just because people are struggling right now to afford the housing around here. I mean, that's been a big challenge for a lot of families. So
right. All right. So I was gonna go back to what happened a month ago, but I think we need to step back and kind of go back to your early life so that we can build the story of who Drew is. Sure. In order for people to understand what happened. So I'm teasing that. Okay. And it's actually, as a spoiler, if someone wants to go to your LinkedIn page, they'll see what I'm talking about. Yeah. But it's the beautiful combination of two things in your life, right? But so you grew up in Alabaster, Alabama, which is south of Birmingham. Yeah. And then basically haven't lived anywhere but here and there. Yeah. In your life, other than 1 year in Iraq. So let's just kind of step through. You know, I'm new to Alabama. I'm in Madison, Greater Huntsville. I like to consider it on the podcast kind of North Alabama as we build the region, and some of the earlier episodes where we interviewed guests that have projects, right, that kind of touch all of the counties that make up North Alabama, which is exciting. But so you in South Birmingham, I mean, what's life like down there? And as that relates to it, what were your thoughts of Huntsville as you grew up and you became aware of the other cities and towns in Alabama? Yeah.
So Alabaster, I mean, nowadays it's a big city. I mean, it's probably comparable to Madison or even a little bit bigger. Okay. When I grew up there, it was not that way. It was just a suburb of Birmingham, but you know, there wasn't a lot going on. If you go on 65 now and get off at the Alabaster exit, there's stuff all over the place. And when I was growing up down there was nothing off that exit. There was like 2 gas stations and all of that's on the other side of the interstate where all the shopping malls and Walmarts, movie theaters, whatever it is. None of that was there. So growing up there, it was a very small town. You know, my mom was a single mom. So my dad passed away when I was 2 or 3. And so pretty much just always grew up with one parent. She was a elementary teacher in inner city Birmingham. So that was, you know, kind of how we grew up, was in a trailer next to some railroad tracks down the road from a YMCA. And it's not like the YMCA here in Madison. I mean, it's like, you know, probably more traditionally what the YMCA was for, you know, lower poverty areas or you know, lower income areas for people to have that free resource. But yeah, I grew up in a trailer right next to railroad tracks. I mean, Mom taught in inner city school, Birmingham. So, I mean, it was, we were always going out there with her when we were off of school. And so a lot of that growing up was just normal. You never thought anything about it. The church that we were involved in did some inner city outreach in the same neighborhood that Mom taught in. So almost every Saturday we were going out there with the church and doing inner city stuff. And of course, all the families knew Mom. So, I mean, all of that was like very normal, I guess, having community service and just kind of hanging out with people that, we didn't really know any better.
Right.
And so growing up, I mean, I don't even think I knew that Huntsville was a city in Alabama. Back then it really wasn't like it is now.
Sure.
I think all you had was a Space Rocket Center and Space Camp. So, I mean, the first time I came up here was probably when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. Took a field trip up here for the Space Rocket Center. And I think that was my first time, coming up here. And so,
but even then, Birmingham was the bigger city, so it's not like it is now.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Birmingham was a place to be. So that's where all the cool stuff was. I mean, when I was growing up, you had Michael Jordan that played for the Barons for that short amount of time.
That's right.
So, I mean, you had all this crazy stuff going on. So,
how old were you when he? That was the mid '90s. So
yeah, I mean, I was in elementary school. I don't remember what grade, but yeah, I mean,
That's
I was old
exciting.
enough to remember it though. It was all like, I don't know, being a kid, you don't really know any better. You thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Then now you're an adult and you realize he was a terrible baseball player. But so but when you were a kid, I mean, that was right when Space Jam would come out. You know what I mean? So it's like you had a lot of cool things with him. So that was like neat stuff growing up in Birmingham back then. But yeah, I came up here, like I said, when I was probably 5th or 6th grade. And then my mom had met, who had become my stepdad. So we ended up moving up here. Shortly after that, I started 8th grade when we moved up here. So that would have been 2002. So that was right after 9/11. So that was a interesting time, moving up here kind of with the arsenal.
Yeah.
I remember driving past and, they had all the Humvees with all the 50 cows mounted and stuff out there when you drive past. And so, I mean, that was an interesting thing growing up as a kid, seeing that and kind of being new to the town.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Let's pause real quick and go back to, was your mom cooking for everybody? Like, what were they just drawn to your family and the kind of the services and the love that you all were, giving to others?
Yeah. My mom was, I guess one of those things too, when you get older, you look back and realize, now that I'm an adult with a family, it's like you kind of look back and realize all that she did. As a kid, I don't think we really appreciated it. But yeah, I mean, I think it was one being, a white woman in a predominantly African-American community. Naturally, you kind of stand out. So I think that was something that people saw her commitment to that school system. She taught there for 30 years, retired. Even after we moved to Huntsville, she drove back and forth to Birmingham.
Wow.
Her last year so she could retire there. So I think people saw her commitment to the community. And then when our church, we went to that church and realized that they were doing inner city outreaches across Birmingham. She was the one that really kind of got them going to her community where her school was. And so I think a lot of people saw that. And there was really no other alternative going out there other than just cooking hot dogs, hanging out with the kids, hanging out with the adults, and just giving people something positive to do. But yeah, I think people were drawn to that. And even the church that we were at, they had they call it a master's commission program. It's basically for like kids right out of high school that are interested in ministry. They kind of live as like interns at the church for 3 or 4 years, kind of a way for them to get involved in ministry, see if it's something they want to do before they go to college or before they commit to it. But a lot of them were kids that were from out of state or out of the city, so they didn't have families nearby. So church members would, adopt what we called MC kids. And so mom had decided to adopt one. And, that was kind of like you were their family while they were in that program at the church. And it got to the point where, I mean, by the end of it, mom had at least like 10 or 15 MC kids that were hers. And so even growing up, that was another unique thing was, like we were always around these older, like 20-year-old kids that would come to the house and just hang out, and when you're like a little kid, I mean, you think they're like the coolest people in the world. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, but again, being through my 20s, you realize how positive an impact my mom had on somebody like that doesn't have family, that isn't from around the area. They weren't being paid to do this program. Like I said, it was like an internship.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was always cooking for them. And so, that's usually how Sundays and the weekends and the weeknights were spent, were them coming over and her cooking meals for these large groups of 20-year-old kids, and then
Yeah.
us, and this is all from a lady that's got a single income, that is a public city school teacher, probably making no money.
Right.
And so I mean, but that's how I grew up, was like all that was very normal. And like I said, I don't think it was until I was an adult that I looked back and realized, like, there's not a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, it sounds like you didn't know your father. He passed away when you were too young. How did he die?
He was an alcoholic, so
Okay.
drinking and driving. So that's always been kind of a big passion thing for me. Is I don't like that. Don't tolerate it. I don't care if people drink. That's not my issue. It's not something that I do. Never done it. But drinking and driving is something that I have a very, very low tolerance for. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm one that was raised by a mom and family that didn't live with. I didn't really ever live with my dad. But did you have a father figure or multiple father figures that you kind of turned to?
Not really. No. I mean, that was kind of the sad part, and I think that's something. The older I get, I feel a little bit more inclined to want to help people that have never had that, or feel a bit more empathetic towards them.
Yeah.
I just never had it. It's for some reason it never really stuck that much. I remember being a kid, and my grandparents lived in Florence. We were in Birmingham, so it was about a 2-hour drive. So they weren't really around enough to be, for my granddad to kind of be that figure. I had a great uncle that kind of lived in the area, but again, just wasn't really close. I feel like a great uncle kind of is a person that's a little bit more removed from, who you kind of normally hang out with and think's cool. But I had a lot of, these MC kids that were like older brothers.
Yeah.
So maybe not necessarily the father figure, but had some positive, older brother role models to look up to. And some of those guys were people that I kept up with and kept up with me, through my 20s and stuff. So, not necessarily a father figure when I was growing up, but had some positive, or I don't know, I doubt they'll ever see this, but if they see it, probably they would think unpositive, but it was good. I mean, it was good being around that.
But you're basically just sitting back and evaluating, and being impressed by those that I want to be a father like that. I want to be a man like that eventually in the future, right? When it's my turn to get married and have a family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, and that answers a lot, because as we get into this, it seems like your life is basically in the public realm, public service, right? And when you get done with high school at not Whitesburg, you're at Westminster, Westminster Christian Academy. There's 2 locations.
Yeah. So
right?
Funny enough, back then when I was in school there, the building that we were in is now where the Downtown Rescue Mission is located.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I graduated from that campus in 2007. So they had that campus, and they had one in Monrovia that was elementary school.
Okay.
But yeah, and then I think they sold that property to the mission, I think in 2009, and that was when they went to their new campus over there. But yeah, when I was in high school, I think they had just built the football field over there where their new school is, and so we got to experience that part of it, but that was really it. But yeah, so it was funny going back to the mission years later, because just telling people, hey, like, this is where I went to high school, was that same building. But yeah.
Were you did you play some sports?
No. I think that's why a lot of people were shocked when I joined the military, because I wasn't really like super athletic. When I graduated high school, I was like 130 pounds, and I was like this little scrawny dude, not athletic, nothing like that. So
that all came later.
Yeah. I'm still not athletic by any means, but yeah, I never really did the sports thing. I don't know. I'm probably going back to not having a dad or somebody pushing you to do that, or maybe us as a family not having the resources to do that, but it was one of those things I was never involved in. Did like upwards and like all the kind of, I don't know, the sports that you play when you're a little kid. But yeah, once, got into middle school and high school, I didn't do anything. So
it is crazy to think about like how much it costs now to participate in high school athletics.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I don't know if they ever asked us for a dime.
Yeah.
And now it's almost punitive to families on how much it costs, particularly in sports where even cheerleading, they can have like, oh, you got to have the home jerseys and the away jerseys and the bags and all this stuff. And I remember spending upwards of like $900 on like parent night.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, we're going to have like, fall sports kickoff. My daughter was cheerleading at the time. She's a freshman in high school. And I also had a son who was in wrestling. So I had just gone to the wrestling meeting. and had to spend like, I don't know, $250 on whatever. And some of that was the mandatory athletic fee because of however state budgets were. This was in Virginia. That was mandatory. So they're going to get $75 no matter what from every student athlete. And then whatever the program, and of course wrestling wasn't going to get the lion's share of the budget.
Right.
But like football and cheerleading did, but I also didn't understand why it was like disproportionately more still on the parents to provide all this money.
Yeah.
And I go into this meeting and it's like, okay, it's 75, for the fee, and then 150 for this, and 100 for that, and 200 for that. It was like $900. I literally spent like almost $1,200, and I had no, I did not expect that.
Yeah.
My wife just said, hey, you need to go to a parent meeting.
Yeah.
And I came back and said, I need to get another job.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, and that's, like I said, being a kid, you don't really think much about that.
Yeah.
But like I said, looking back now, that may have been one factor was, just having a single parent and having limited income. That may have been.
Or maybe you just wanted to spend time with your family.
Yeah, that too. Like I said, it was one of those things that never interested me. I was active as a kid, rode bikes, did all the crazy neighborhood stuff, but sports just was never one of those things that stuck with me. So.
Well, your mom is smart because you start getting on those travel teams and things. Yeah. You got to think about this with, your kids, but that ends up killing your whole weekend.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe she was like, let's just lie low. Yeah. And if he doesn't say anything, then all the better.
Right.
All right. So, let's go to, so you end up graduating and going into the Guard.
Yeah.
So talk me through that decision process.
Yeah. So I joined when I was still in high school. So January 2007, I would have graduated May 2007. But I joined, signed the paperwork. You didn't go to basic training till after I graduated high school. But I grew up in the height of the global war on terror. Veterans call it the GWAT, and so it's like that was back in the heyday. And I remember vividly, being a young guy and sitting up at night and watching, the invasion of Iraq and all that. My cousin, who was like kind of another guy I looked up to, he went to Iraq, I think in 2003 maybe. He was in the Guard. He lived in Florence, but he went in 2003, and that was that kind of sticks with you when you're a high school kid. That's the kind of stuff that appeals to you.
Yeah.
And so of course I joke with some of my friends sometimes about that's when you had Toby Keith coming out with all these crazy songs, and it's like you kind of, that's all for a little while.
Alan Jackson had the Remember When.
Yes. Yeah. And so so you have all those influences, and then like I said, you got a family member that goes and does that.
Do you think it impacted you more living up in Huntsville near the Arsenal than it would have if you were still in Birmingham?
Probably so. Because by the time we moved up here, we were seeing our family influence more, because we were only like an hour away at that point. So we were seeing more of them. But yeah, it's hard to not be, like I said, you drive by the Arsenal and see all these crazy security measures they've got set up. And, and I think being a young guy, like there's just kind of a natural inclination to those kind of things anyway sometimes. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that stuck with me was my cousin did it. And so that was something that I thought, that maybe felt a little bit of responsibility that I needed to do that. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in high school and him, making me promise him like I'd never joined the Guard and all this other stuff. And of course I did it anyways. But but back then too, they were passing out stupid bonuses to people that would come in and enlist. So, when you're 17 years old and they're like, hey, if you do this job, we'll give you $20,000.
You're like, what?
It's like, okay, like, yeah, why not? Let's go. So, I signed up when I was in high school, and I was 17. So mom had to come with me and sign the paperwork at the recruiter's office. I'm sure she probably didn't want me to, but I don't think she really cared either. I think she knew my mind was on it. So, it's kind of just one of those things that we did. And
did you have any other recruiters contact you from the other branches of the military?
No. I went to the National Guard recruiter. He was his office was in Calhoun Community College over there off Wynn. Mm-hmm. And so when it, I guess I found it. I don't remember how. And so I went in there with her. We talked to him. And, of course, recruiters being recruiters, like, they're good at kind of swindling you a little bit and getting you in there, and you're a young guy, and it's, like I said, you've got 2 wars going on, so they're just looking for bodies to fill jobs, and they've got to meet quotas for that kind of stuff. And, so we went in there, and there really wasn't much convincing they had to do. I was already made up on it, and like I said, I think I went National Guard route just because that's what my cousin had done. So he was somebody
Yeah.
that could kind of tell me about it and
Yeah.
explain to me how it worked, firsthand. So that's
Makes
just the route
sense.
that I went. Yeah.
So where did you go for basic?
Went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Place is hell on earth.
Really?
Yeah. They've all got little nicknames and stuff, all the different bases, at least back then, that people were going to. And so, that one was always Fort Lost in the Woods just because it's in the middle of the woods. And, I was always told it's like the armpit of the U.S. And, man, it was rough. I got there in September, and their September was like it is here. It's just hot and awful. Then we got into wintertime, and you're dealing with
Cold.
negative degree wind chills, and you've got ice and snow everywhere. Yeah, so I mean, that place was miserable. I hated it. I hated it so much there.
And how long were you there?
I was there for about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was, like I said, I got a little bit of summer and then mostly winter. And I think that's, I hate cold weather nowadays, and I think that is one thing that made me hate cold weather, is because you can't dress how you want to dress. You dress how they tell you to dress, and that was just not a fun experience being in the cold that long.
So aside from now you're in the Guard, and it sounds like your cousin is a good influence for you, but once you get there, like, how long is it before you start kind of thinking longer term, or what am I going to specialize in, or what does my career look like?
Yeah.
How do I want to use this experience?
Yeah. So when you sign up, they make you choose your MOS, then your military occupation specialty. So I did military police because, like I said, that's what they were passing out the highest bonuses for at that time. And so, they, you take your ASVAB, and they kind of tell you based on that what you can do. And of course, they're looking for people that, like I said, will go into any job. So back then, it wasn't really like a good explanation of what all you could do. Mm-hmm. It was just, this is what we need at the time.
Right.
And so that was a pretty high end job at that point. So that's what I did. It's, like I said, I didn't put much thought into it. When you're 17, somebody says $20,000, you say, okay, and you do it. And so I don't know that I really even thought about career-wise with it. I mean, I don't think it was something I ever planned on doing till retirement. But, I will say, being in the Guard and being in an MP unit, I mean, we didn't do a lot of law enforcement stuff directly. Like I said, during a wartime, we were doing more of the protective security detail when we were over in Iraq, and so that's mainly what we spent our time training up for. But it's a combat arms MOS, so it's you can really get stuck doing just about anything as an MP, whether that's good or bad. And thankfully, I got stuck usually doing good stuff. We had fun. But yeah, I don't know that I ever really thought about long term kind of what that would look like. And looking back now, I think there's other jobs I could have chosen. I probably would have enjoyed more, but it is what it is.
So it sounds like your job was when you had VIPs or others that were going to be leaving the base or the compound, and you were that detail.
Yeah.
And or doing a forward team, and doing surveillance on wherever the location was of where you were going, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty much what it was. I spent, I got in 2007, so I mean, I was graduated, by like February or March 2008, and got put my first unit here in Huntsville. They had been deployed somewhat recently, so they weren't slotted to go on another deployment for a while. So there was, what was our battalion unit that was in Athens, the 203rd MP Battalion. They were getting ready to go to Iraq, I think in what would have been 2009. So we spent most of 2008, transferred over there. We spent most of 2008 training to go over there and do a similar mission. Towards the end of our training, the unit got cut back because of the drawdown that was happening in Iraq. They were pulling troops out. So there was about half of us that got dropped from the unit that didn't get to go. Mm-hmm. And that was a pretty big bummer, because those were like most of the guys that I had met when I'd first gotten in. Those were guys that had looked out for me. And, when you're a private, you're an idiot and you don't know anything. And so these were guys that were a little bit older, had been in for a little bit longer, and they kind of took care of me and made sure I was on the right track. And so most of them got to go, and I got stuck here. So when we got dropped from that unit, there was another unit that had come up, the 214th MP Company that was in Alexander City, which is just north of Auburn. And so they came and said, hey, we're going in 2010, and so if you guys want to transfer to our unit, be more than happy to help you. So that put me basically training to go to Iraq from 08 to 09, then 09 to 10. And so finally got deployed to them in 2010. But yeah, when we got deployed, you don't really find out what you're doing until you get in country, just because there's a lot that can change. When we were in Kuwait, one of our platoons got sent to Bahrain to do some force protection stuff over there. So it was, just an ever-changing thing back then. It was just you never really knew exactly what was going to happen until the Army decided what you needed to do. And so when we got in country, the unit we were replacing, they were doing the protective security detail. And so we had a mix. We would do mostly that, but a lot of it for some of the other platoons was training the Iraqi police and working with the Iraqi Army, training them. And so, so I mean, that was pretty much the two missions that we had. Like I said, my platoon mainly spent most of the time focusing on doing the protective security detail. Mainly it was for field grade officers, so colonels, lieutenant colonels that were going out and meeting with Iraqi police chiefs and captains and Iraqi Army, people of like an equivalent rank. So we were just going out and doing protection for them. Yeah. But we were working pretty closely with the Iraqis at that point. We were the next to last unit before everybody got pulled out of Iraq. So I mean, at that point, you were integrated pretty closely with a lot of them.
You finished the guard in 2012, right? Is that about right?
2013. Yeah, I got out in 2013.
So this is kind of one of those. We talked a little bit about 9/11, and you think about 9/11 and where you were, and you were here as a younger person, right? Yeah. But talk me through your feelings when you found out in 2011 that they got bin Laden.
I was in Iraq when that happened.
Were you?
And so that was, I think our biggest thing was we were worried about kind of what the backlash would that would be from different insurgent groups. And so, obviously the Taliban's not involved in Iraq, but, you had Al-Qaeda in Iraq and some other splinters of those groups that were there in the country, and that they were the ones carrying out most of the attacks. And so I think that was our biggest concern starting off was if there's going to be any kind of uptick in the violence that we saw. Other than that, though, I mean, everybody was pretty happy about it. It's one of those things that it was cool to get to see that. And it was, to me, being neat being in country when that happened. And of course, typical military fashion, we found out on the news. Like, we didn't find out from like any kind of special briefing or anything. It's like you just, we had like pretty crappy Wi-Fi, but you pull up the news for the day or whatever, and you see that they got them, and it was like, oh, that's glad we found out like everybody else instead of being told, in some kind of special way. But I
thought you would at least had some sort of all hands and some sort of internal meeting and keep it to yourselves, and you'll see it in the news eventually.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, probably as secretive as it was, there's probably nobody that really knew about it, until it happened. So
I was, gosh, that was a Sunday, right? That they started the radio. I think it was a Sunday, and that Monday, I worked in I played in a golf tournament with the intelligence community, and it was Leon Panetta, who was the director of the CIA at the time, was supposed to be there, and I was supposed to get a picture with him because I won like the closest to the pen contest. Yeah. And but he never showed up because that's the day they would like. And I remember when he came for like a brief appearance. Yeah. And that had we didn't realize it. That had all just gone down. And I think they were still verifying things. And I think they had verified it and said, okay, we got him. Yeah. And he comes flying out there in his convoy to this golf course, and which was probably about 30 miles from headquarters, and they were just grinning ear to ear.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And but then I wasn't able to. I was bummed because I was supposed to get my picture with them. Yeah. And then off he went, and then I guess hours later we find out the news. Like, well, that's why he was beaming into ear to ear. Yeah.
It's a good reason for miss your picture with him, though, right?
That's one of those things where I can't get enough of like listening to just interviews on anybody that was involved. Yeah. Right. I gravitate to those types of things and those kinds of amazing stories. Yeah. I don't know how you are with that kind of stuff, if anything in history, but it's just fascinating.
My bookshelves at home are full of a lot of military history. I mean, the current stuff I think obviously interests me the most, just because it's stuff that I lived through or was connected to somehow personally. So it's cool getting to kind of go back, especially now being out and it's been decades. Yeah. You get to look back and kind of see some of the things now that played out that people have put together. But yeah, I mean, I'm all about that kind of stuff, man. It's neat to get to see it and just kind of see, what the U.S. is capable of. They need to be,
So part of the and I think you answered it before you came in today, and I'm doing research and who you are. And as I mentioned before, you have a life of, you served your country. Now you come back and your employment has all been around the public good and helping and putting yourself out there. right now, yeah, with being a volunteer in a fire department, right, and that's your spare time, and then being employed at First Stop, right, meeting the homeless, and you may have other things too that aren't even on your resume that you do. What talk me through then? Was that just kind of, was there something about the military and or your upbringing and the impact your mother had on you, where you kind of chose, hey, I want to do this. I want to work for nonprofits. I want to work in some capacity to just help the public. Does that make sense? Kind of after you got out of the Guard. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah. I mean, I probably more my upbringing than anything. I think, like I said, it was just more natural to feel like helping people feels natural, I guess, is the best way to put it. And so, too, it's growing up with a single mom, not having a lot of things most of the time. I feel like it's a little bit easier sometimes to volunteer doing stuff too, just because, I'm fine kind of, where I'm at. I think I'm better off than obviously I was growing up as a kid. So it's like, but I think the way I look at it too is, if I have the ability or the means to help somebody, I'm going to do it regardless of the compensation that I get. Kind of goes into some of the medical classes I teach, and taught CPR or teach CPR classes, taught some self-defense classes for a few years. All things that like I do for pretty cheap compared to what people who do that for a living do. And the way I look at most of it is just, again, if I have a way to help somebody, then I'm going to do it. And so, I think the Guard maybe made me realize what I was capable of in certain ways, that I could do something more than just kind of be a bump on a log. But I think it was more my upbringing where it's, you get to see firsthand, hey, like it really doesn't take a lot of effort to help people around you. And, getting to see the impact that mom had on not just kids, but their parents. That was all stuff that, she didn't have to spend any extra money to go out on a Saturday and hang out with them when she wasn't at school. Yeah. But the impact that had on them was huge. And, if I had any way to find some of her old students, I mean, I would love to talk to them. Yeah. But she passed away in 2020 from cancer.
She did.
Yeah. And we were going through some of her old stuff and had found a letter that had been written by one of her former students, years ago. But it was cool getting to read that and kind of seeing the impact she had. But like I said, I think growing up, I mean, that's, it's normal. And you see that, like I said, you can do stuff to help people without having to have a lot of resources. So,
and then at some point, so you were in the military police, MOS, right? Yeah. But at some point you start getting medical training. You get into tactical medicine. I guess back in the days of World War II and stuff, right? There's field medics, and essentially that's kind of what that is, right? You're a hospital, a field level hospital, trying to give as much care as you can to save someone's life, because bleeding out was probably the highest cause of death. Yeah, and just not being able to control that. So I guess at what point though do you start getting advanced training in being an EMS and tactical medicine and first aid and all those types of things, and that becomes an interest and now really a part of who you are in your career?
Yeah.
Does that happen after the military?
That was in the military. I mean, I remember, like I said, back then, when you're at the height of the two wars, and you just, when I was in base training was when the surge was happening in Iraq. My first week of basic training was what they were calling basic lifesaver. And so it was learning how to treat traumatic injuries from blast wounds, penetration wounds, shrapnel. And our drill sergeants were people who had already done 2 or 3 deployments in Iraq or Afghanistan and had watched their buddies die. And, your first week, literally the first week, that's the first thing we went over was that. One, because I think it was the most important thing we probably learned, but 2, they were passionate about it because they had watched their friends die. And I remember, again, being an 18-year-old idiot that's in basic training, not ever thinking about that's a real reality of combat. And, they're telling you, like, you're going to watch your friends die. You're going to watch people get blown up. And, it made you take that training seriously because you're like, okay, I'm going to have to do this. And so, back in those courses back then, they were training us on how to start IVs, and we're not medics. We're just normal soldiers that are going through basic training. But that was part of the training, was learning how to start IVs, learning how to do needle decompressions. And so things that in a civilian setting or at an advanced or a paramedic level that you have to be trained specially to do, they're training privates in basic training to do this. So that was my first exposure to anything medically. And so again, I think when you're 18 and that's being put on you pretty hardcore, it's something that interested me. And so that was something that I think that early exposure just had a big impact on me. And so of course, when I went to Iraq, that was something that, took very seriously then.
Yeah.
And, we were back then, we had one medic for our whole company. Or, well, I guess it was really two, but you had a senior medic and then just a normal medic. And so, it was sometimes that we were going out without a medic. And so the female that was, our squad medic, she did a really good job of training us and giving us extra supplies and making sure that we kind of knew what to do if she wasn't with us for some reason. But as a soldier during wartime, getting ready to go to combat, you're learning just about everything there is to learn with the medical stuff and learning how to do medevacs. And so like I said, those are all things that stuck with me when I was in. And then I think the older I got, when I got back from Iraq, that was when I had an interest in doing civilian medicine. I just never got around to it at that time.
So it sounds like, I may have missed it and you touched on it, but it sounds like that's one big lesson learned within the greater U.S. military in the wars that we've been in is, hey, we need to train more people on first aid and helping them on the battlefield, right, to preserve life. And it sounds like you're talking in wartime, definitely. Doesn't matter what your job function is, you're going to learn these basic life-saving skills, right, or first aid skills. And but has that now gone into even outside of wartime, where that is a part of the curriculum or part of just the basic training as far as are you aware of that in any way? Like,
yeah. So the military, they had it around when I was in, but they weren't teaching it to everybody. But now the big component that they're doing is called TCCC. So it's Tactical Combat Casualty Care. And so it's, there's civilians that teach that course to other civilians right now. It's really geared more to the military though. And even inside the military, it's really geared more towards medics, but it's a training that they've put together where, it's pretty robust. It covers everything, that you would need to know if somebody was injured, but then also how to kind of maintain that person if you're in a prolonged setting where, medevac's delayed for some reason. And so that was something that they adopted, as a DoD wide program, while we were still active in Afghanistan. But like I said, when I was in, it was mainly just this basic lifesaver course. But yeah, it's grown exponentially to where they realized that, teach people how to do basic things like put on tourniquets, pack wounds, put on chest seals. Those are big things that made big impacts for a lot of people.
Okay. So now let's talk about being in the volunteer fire department.
Yeah.
And let's start it by, I'm going to pretend like I'm your first interviewer. You're now interviewing with the Harvest Volunteer Fire Department.
Yeah.
And you're sitting down in front of me, and I'm going to ask this question. Drew, why do you want to be a volunteer firefighter? And do you remember what your response was at the time?
Yeah.
Assuming they asked you a question like that.
I was probably asked something like that. Our interview process is a little informal, but for me, and I think anybody else that I volunteer with in our department, it's, our mantra is citizen over self. And so that's our big thing, is that I'm in that department to help people. And, as a volunteer, not being paid, that's really got to be your main motivation, or, you're just not in it for the right reason. So,
right. So you gave some answer kind of along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you would still give that answer if you were interviewing again?
Yeah. Okay. Even more so now, probably. Yeah.
Let's bring up the webpage.
Okay.
If we look here, this is the Harvest Volunteer Fire Department, and it's got some pretty cool resources. Actually, let me go to home. I think I'm on the news section.
This is our new website too. We just got this set up. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Kyler, shout out to him. He worked to get this set up. And
What do you want to point out on this for our viewers?
So I mean, I think the big thing right there is join the team. You know, we're always in need of volunteers. That is our big thing, and we're at the point that we don't care what your experience is. If you've got a heart for it and you're serious about it, we'll train you. We can send you to EMS or EMT school. We'll handle all the fire training for you, get you certified with that through the state. But yeah, I mean, the big thing is if you're wanting to do something to help your community, it's a good route to go. And, you know, that's, I think one thing I'm starting to see, we've got a guy that just joined us. He's a Marine veteran, and that was kind of the same thing. Kind of what I was looking for too when I joined was, you know, you're looking for that camaraderie, looking to do something to give back. And, that's a good way to do it.
And so it sounds like, going the volunteer route, there are definitely advantages to setting you up for the long term, getting tons of training, and ultimately, like maybe becoming a professional firefighter, and you get a lot of that cost savings out of the way, right?
Yeah.
But is that well? Actually, let me ask this question: Who's the primary funder of the volunteer fire programs? Is that a local, state, or is it private donors that's coming to you all to fund you all?
Yeah, it's both. So we get a budget from the county, and so the different departments in the county get different budgets, typically based off of the size of the department, the community they serve, how many calls they run, and so that's one of the deciding factors. But for Harvest, you know, we are a 501c3, so we do take donations. So, you know, I would say compared to the other nonprofits I've worked at, we don't really tap into major donors like I'm used to seeing. But we do a fair amount of grants that we get. Typically, those are for equipment, so that's really where the major expenses of those things come from, is typically from grants. And then Josh Newton, who's one of our chiefs and is also our treasurer, he's like a financial wizard. And so he manages our money well, for one, but then two, we are able to file reports with insurance companies for wrecks that we work. And so that's been an additional source of income for us that's worked pretty well. Okay. So, you know, we build an insurance company for the service we provide.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for traditional medical calls and fire calls, we don't bill anybody, just to clarify for that. But if there is a wreck or a hazmat situation or something with a wreck, we will go through an insurance company and make sure that we get compensated for using equipment, putting wear and tear on the vehicle, stuff like that. So
I see.
Yeah.
And but you mentioned, so at the county, at the budget level, part of that is going to the actual full-time career firefighters, and then there's a portion that goes to the volunteer program?
So the career firefighters in our community, you know, would be Huntsville City, Madison City.
Okay.
I think Owens Crossroads has their own fire department now. That's city. So that comes from their own individual budgets. Ours comes from Madison County. Okay. So it's a little bit different. So Madison County doesn't have any paid departments, like I said, outside of Owens Crossroads, but they're their own, you know, incorporated town. So all the money that's coming from the county is just for the volunteer departments.
Okay.
So it's not like a competition with like the, you know, career guys are getting a bigger budget than we are. I mean, they are, because it's Huntsville City or Madison City, but
Sure.
But yeah, we're getting funding from the county that's divided up among the 16 departments that are in the county.
Now, let's talk about, so you go in for the interview, you get hired, kind of comparing and contrasting what it's like to go into the Guard and boot camp. I mean, what's the training regiment like, even at the volunteer level, before you're on your first call?
Yeah.
You know, like what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, so it's a little bit different. So with the volunteer fire service, like I said, you can join our department, specifically Harvest, with no experience, no certifications or anything, and we'll take you and we can train you up to be at our level of what we're doing, but then also, like I said, pay for, you know, EMT school so you can go through National Registry and get your state EMT license. And then you've also got your Alabama Fire College fire certification. So for the volunteer departments, you've got to be certified in Fire 1 at a minimum to be a firefighter. And so it's not like you can just join and we kind of do in-house things and we shove you off and let you do stuff, you know.
Right.
For EMS, I mean, you've got to be a nationally registered EMT, advanced EMT or paramedic. You got to have active license. And then to do firefighting, you've got to have your Firefighter 1 certification, which, like I said, they do classes here in the county for that to get guys put through that. But yeah, if you show up with no training and no experience, we'll get you integrated, show you how we do things, show you how we operate. And while you're waiting to get those certifications, you can be active at the station when we're up there doing training or doing other things. You can come on calls, but it's usually just in a role of you're sitting back and watching. If it's like a fire, you would be helping do getting water for people, maybe making sure that kind of everything's situated with the vehicles. But it's not like anything, where you're putting your hands on stuff unless you've been trained and certified.
So are we talking like 6 months to a year for someone to become fully certified?
Yeah, I mean, so EMT school is only a semester, so I mean it's 3 months at Calhoun at least. So at least a minimum of that. If you're wanting to do just EMS. And that's to clarify too, with the fire departments in the county, we do EMS calls, we run wrecks, obviously fires, any kind of fire, and then any other rescue things that come out, whether it's search and rescue, lost person, stuff like that. So at Harvest, I mean, that's the majority. And for most of the county departments, that's the majority of what we do is EMS calls. Okay. So that's why there's a big emphasis on that. But yeah, so it's at least a 3-month minimum, when you go through once you pass that class, your EMT class, you've got to take your National Registry exam, which, can be a bit of a doozy for some people. It's a pretty tough little test. But then once you pass that, I mean, you're technically licensed to practice medicine and to get started. We've got one person that's with us right now that she just graduated Calhoun's EMT program. And so we went on a call with her last night, me and another guy. So kind of there to supervise. Yeah. Let her get her feet wet. She had patient care. She was making sure the lady was okay. It was a lower priority call, so it wasn't anything too crazy, but it's a good chance for her just to kind of run through what she's learned in school. And with most things, stuff's different when you get in the real world from how it is in school. And so some of that too is showing her how things operate and then how we kind of do stuff as well at Harvest that may be a little bit different than what she learned. But yes, I mean, you're probably close if you want to do EMT and firefighter, probably close to 5 or 6 months, just with the training and everything else. The Firefighter 1 program, I can't remember how long it lasts, but I mean, it's probably similar where it's a few months where you kind of go in for a weekend class here and there, and they get you certified on different things and kind of just get you moved along as quick as they can. So
okay, and then once you're certified, you're officially a part of the crew. You're on the team. You're on the shift. What do those shifts look like? And then that follow up to that is how does that fit nicely or difficult with your other job? Yeah. Right? Like when you have other employment. Well, you have to have other employment, right? It's volunteer. But right. What is the requirement, if you will, on the number of hours you have to be there, number of days, that type of thing?
Yeah. So our requirements for Harvest, there's a certain percentage of the calls that you have to run per quarter. And as many calls as we run, it's pretty easy to meet that percentage. Okay. There is some leeway. I think it was last year we opened it up to where if you didn't live in Harvest, you could come and volunteer anyways, and you could just, come to the station, sit up there for a few hours, run any calls that come out. So I mean, there's some leeway with how you can run calls. That's I think the challenge with most of the volunteer departments is getting a schedule set up because almost everybody is working traditional 9 to 5-ish Monday through Friday kind of jobs. So typically your weekday is going to be a lot harder to have somebody up there to fill those roles and fill those hours than it is like the nighttime, the evening stuff. Thankfully we've got one gentleman who is, I don't know, he's like an EMS god. He's done everything. He's a nurse. he's an EMT. Yeah. He's an old Army guy who is Special Forces. So, but he's retired, so he's able to be up there most of the time and handles a lot of our daytime calls. And then we've got a few guys that are also career firefighters. So they've got, a schedule where they're working 24 off 48 or something similar to that. So they're able to be up there sometimes during the week as well to help out. So that's kind of how we're covering it. For us, we don't necessarily have set shifts. With our department specifically, we've got responder vehicles that we call medics. So it's just for us, we've got 3 Tahoes and 5 Chevy Silverados that are have Harvest on side, have light sirens, everything. It's a county vehicle, but people will take those home with them. So as calls come out, you run those calls from your house.
Gotcha.
And so that's one way that we're able to kind of meet that demand of the calls is you don't have to be sitting up at the station for 8 hours. You know, you could be at home with your family hanging out. And then if something comes out, you run that call if you're able to. So there's still some taxing times, you know, when you've got a family and you're in the middle of doing stuff or having dinner and you've got a call that comes out. But that's one way that we've kind of bypassed that is letting people have these take-home vehicles that they can run calls as they're able to. And then, you know, at nighttime, that's something that we've been trying out lately is having a nighttime run calendar where, you know, you've got a couple guys that pick up one night a week and say, hey, this is going to be my night that I'll run calls. Gotcha. And so then they cover 9 o'clock at night until whatever time in the morning they have to get ready to go to work.
Now, what about on the dispatch side though? Is that also volunteer?
No. So the county fire is paid dispatchers. So it's just a Madison County Fire, you know, communications or whatever they want to call it. But yeah, they work in the 911 dispatcher with everybody else. And so, yeah, that is a paid full-time position. So there is always, you know, 2 or 3 people working as dispatchers for county fire. So
now I used to live in a county in a kind of rural area where we had the big siren that went off because we had volunteer fire. And I'm trying to think. I haven't been tracking this for years, and I'm going to feel stupid if this is a really dumb question, but is that now a thing of the past because you can use text and you can use mobile devices and such, or is there still a demand anywhere for the big siren that goes off and warns the volunteer personnel, hey, you need to get in?
Yeah, I'm sure in some areas there is. For Madison County, I mean, it's a pretty legit system. I mean, we've got Motorola radios that you know the career departments have, that HMZ has, that HPD Sheriff's Office has. So I mean, they're $5,000 or $6,000 radios that we all take home with us.
Okay.
That if your radio is on, you can leave it muted so you don't hear everything. But when there's a call, County Fire will dispatch that call to like all the Harvest radios, and it'll set off a tone on your radio. So the tone will just keep beeping until you mute it or, you know, you acknowledge the call. So that's how we get dispatched to calls is you've got a radio, you leave your radio on mute so you're not hearing everything all the time. But if there's a call, I mean, it's almost like a weather radio, like it's very loud, obnoxious. So, I mean, if it's on, you'll hear it. But we also utilize a phone app called Active 911. And so it's set up through County Fire to where we receive all of our notes about the call on that app. And it'll I think it's like for the first 9 minutes or something like that, it sends you an alert every minute about the call. So there's even times where, like, if you don't have your radio with you and you've got your phone and you've got the app, you know, that's not on Do Not Disturb or something, you'll get those texts or those alerts from the app pretty obnoxiously. So it's hard sometimes to miss a call when you've got those things around you. But that's a unique. There's some other departments that use Active 911, but that's been a big game changer, I think, for us as a volunteer department. Is, you know, you get all of your notes about the call, you get the address, it's automatically hooked up to your GPS on your phone. So you just hit the Apple or Google GPS on the app, it automatically loads your GPS for you and shows you where to go. So that's a big help, having things like that too, because, you know, it's not like the old days of having to learn your maps and where you're going and everything else. I mean, it's, you know, you pull up your phone and load it and pretty much you can go, and then you can read, you know, all of your notes before you head out the door of what the call is, what's going on with it. So you're not just walking in blind to it. So
do you have a bunch of the old timers that constantly remind you of how difficult it used to be?
Some of them. I mean, you know, Harvest is a lot busier now than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So, you know, back in the day when they didn't have these systems in place, I think it may have been a little bit easier because you weren't running the volume of calls that we're running now. But, you know, I think last year we were upwards of 2,000 calls just for last year. And, you know, we've got, you know, maybe 10 or 12 people that are active members in our department. So, I mean, it's a lot of calls for a group that size. So,
yeah. But I guess to some degree, if you were in Harvest for a while, you know where everything is after a while, right? You know all the streets and stuff, right? Like, even if it was 1980 and you probably knew where you were going just based on what the dispatcher told you. Like, oh yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah, and when they dispatch it, you know, they give you cross streets, so it kind of shows you where you're going. Like, you can kind of get in your head mentally, and, you know, again, once you've been doing it for a while, if you've lived in Harvest for a while, you learn where most of the neighborhoods are. You know, there's still some streets that we don't go too often, or that you may not be familiar with, so GPS is good. I always pull it up just to make sure that I'm going to the right spot, just so I'm not having a lapse in memory of where I'm supposed to be headed to. But yeah, I mean, you can generally learn, but it's nice because, in the fire service, you have what you call like your first, second, and third due areas. And so first due would be harvest. That's where we're responsible for. For us, second and third due would be Monrovia and Tony and Bobo. So some other outlying areas kind of around harvest in our area of the county. So those are times where active's good when you're in communities that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Or some of the areas in Tony that are kind of out there a little bit more rural than what we see in Harvest and Monrovia. And you're not always sure where you're going. So that's where it really gets to be beneficial when you're kind of creeping out to some of these other areas that you may not go to all the time.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I used to travel on business to London, but this was like 2008, 2009. And I would talk to the cabbies, and they had to go to school for, I want to say I think it was almost 3 years, and they had to memorize every street in London, which is thousands of streets, like to pass the exam, so that if I jump in, now this is, I'm sure it's a different story now, but this was, we had smartphones, but it wasn't as adept with the maps and the guidance and stuff that we have now.
Yeah.
And I think that was just always a very traditional thing for them, where I could say where I'm, I want to go here, and they just knew how to get there. They had it memorized.
That's wild.
And it was like intense. And now I wonder, like, there's no way they're still doing that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd be in trouble. I mean, that's like I said, I generally know where I'm going in harvest, but you get to some of these neighborhoods that are pretty big and have a lot of streets in them, and it can be hard to navigate through those sometimes when you're not sure where you're going. And, and sometimes too, I mean, your GPS will map you the best route or the fastest route based on traffic too. And so that's another benefit of having those is, in harvest, 53 gets backed up pretty quick certain times of the day, or Sparkman does right there off Jeff. And so sometimes it's good to have those things too, because you can kind of see what traffic's up to and not have to be weaving and dodging a bunch of people. So
So let's do this. There's so many angles I could go into. We could talk about fire science and smoke and different things, or just some of the training elements. But I'm going to bring up a few pictures.
Okay.
And I believe in your lingo you call them like kind of sizing up the scene.
Yeah.
You get a call and you roll up on it, and immediately there's stuff going through each of your minds as to what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Right. And what's your next step, and you're, I don't know, in a matter of seconds, all the things you're processing to figure out, okay, we're going to jump out of this truck, and then what are we doing first?
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you some pictures here, and just kind of talk us through it.
Okay.
Maybe use some of your what you see in the picture, and kind of what are the steps that you're going to be taking, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So this is I guess it's kind of like a townhouse.
Yeah.
But you roll up on the scene, and I guess the question is, like, what is that report? You got to report something back, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be in communication.
Yeah.
Kind of what's your initial assessment?
Yeah. I mean, so typically for our guys, and most of the guys on our side of the county, at least, the first thing that you're gonna say, even before you get there, I mean, you can see that thick black smoke. You're gonna see that pretty far off. So that's something that we're good about communicating before we even get on scene, is saying that, you can see smoke from, whatever closest intersection or cross street you're at. And so for most people, when you're hearing on the radio, hey, I'm seeing thick smoke from, so for example, there was a house fire in Monrovia a few months ago, and we were at the Jackson Center at a trauma conference, and we take our vehicles with us in case we need to roll somewhere. So this fire comes out, and a couple of our guys go to check it out, because sometimes you get calls that are not always what they're dispatched as. So two of them get ready to go on the road. They're at the Jackson Center, get on research right there off Bradford. They can see the smoke, and this house was over off Douglas and Jeff. And so they can see the smoke from research at Bradford.
Wow.
So they communicate that immediately, which lets everybody else know, okay, like that's the real deal. Like this thing is going.
It's more than a 2-man job.
Yeah. So that's typically the first thing is going to be that before you even get there, somebody's going to communicate that they would see that smoke. The next thing that, they're going to communicate is they're going to say that the house is fully involved, or they're going to say that there's smoke and flame showing. Anything that you can give the rest of the people that are coming a good indication of, hey, this is a real fire. Because like I said, there's a lot of things you get dispatched to that may not be a fire. It may be, an oven was on fire. There's a little bit of light smoke in the house. But saying that you see flames and see smoke when you're doing your 360 is a good indicator to let people know they need to step it up and that you got a real fire. And two, that helps you know what resources you need to allocate to. You know, if you've only got a handful of people coming from the 2 or 3 departments that are on their way, you may need to hit the tones to get different departments out there as well to provide some more coverage for that. So
okay.
yeah.
And I mean, would you be a little nervous if you came right up and you saw this level of damage already?
I mean, I think most people would be pretty excited. The guys get a little excited when you got flames showing. The other thing that always you're keeping in mind is, and usually it's communicated when the person that calls 911 says that their house is on fire, whether there's any occupants, animals, or anything else inside the house. So again, typically we know that information before we get there. But that's why, like, our guys at Harvest are big on learning how to search when they go interior, is to make sure that there's not any chance that there was somebody or a pet or something that was left behind in there. So that's kind of the other thing you got to keep in mind too when you see something like that is there somebody inside? Yeah. I think the one thing that most of our guys would be concerned about would be the extension to the houses next door. Those houses are very close. You get a lot of that radiant heat that comes off of, and if you've never been around a structure fire, I mean, the heat is intense, even if you're just standing on the street. I mean, usually it's more than you can bear even being on the street. And so, so a fire that's cooking like that, I mean, you'd be really concerned about it maybe even potentially has caught that house to the right of it on fire. So that would be another big thing that they would be looking at and being concerned of.
All right, let's go to the next one. And honestly, I can't remember what order they're in or what. Okay, so here's a little bit of a blurry shot, but it looks like we got a single family home now.
Yeah. So the number one thing that you'd be worried about is anytime you see flames that are coming through the roof like that. It's a good indicator that it's spread to the attic, and once the fire gets in the attic, it's going to be burning. Usually the houses at that point are going to be heavily damaged. It gets to the point where the house is probably going to end up being a loss as soon as you got the flames coming through the roof. Conditions like that also will make it very difficult for firefighters once they're inside, so they may have to pull out just because it starts to affect the structure itself, and you open it up to collapse. And so that's something to keep in mind with that, is that if you've got smoke and flames to the roof, that'd be another thing that'd be communicated by the first person on scene, and it's definitely something that I think that would be concerning. That would be what may make some people nervous, is when you've got those things that are showing.
Okay, next one. Oh, that's it. Okay, here we go. So a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
These are very common around here now. There's tons and tons of apartment buildings, right?
Yeah. Apartments have become a major concern with the county departments. Monrovia on our side of the county is really the first department that has had to deal with apartments being in their district. They recently just got a ladder truck to serve that purpose, to get to these high-rise structures like that. Harvest is due for some apartments that are coming in off 53, sometime the next year or two. But that's something that people have to be aware of if they live in the county, and why sometimes we need support from the citizens pushing some stuff in front of the county commissioners. Is that you've got these structures that are being put in the county, and firefighters don't often have the resources to combat that. Now, you would hope in these structures that they're up to code, that they've got sprinkler systems, they've got riser systems in there, so you can tap into the water supply in the building. Our guys train with Monrovia at the apartments that are at Cliff Farms. They train in those, especially when they were first built, on the best way to deal with that before they got their ladder truck. But I mean, that's something that for us and in our area is becoming a big concern, just because those are new structures that most departments are not equipped to handle, that are with the volunteer service.
So what is the code in a residential area for you all to hook into a fire hydrant? Like how many yards of hose do you guys carry on your trucks? I mean, or is there
hundreds of feet.
Okay.
In Harvest, with Harvest and Monrovia, we've got our own private water departments. That's a unique feature of people that live out there and get that water service. Is it's run pretty well, and they've got hydrants just about everywhere you need a hydrant to be. There's some areas where there's not, but typically you've got a hydrant within 500 feet of whatever house you need to be at.
That's not an issue then.
Yeah, typically it's not. Now, there's some houses that we have had issues with that. There's houses, like I said, in Tony or some of these other areas that we've gone to, where they've had to shuttle water back and forth. There's some older homes that have been out in Harvest or Monrovia for for decades that they don't have access to hydrants like that, or they're off these really super long driveways. So that's something where you've got some techniques to shuttle water back and forth between different engines. You know, and we've got the 5-inch line, which is, you know, what you typically hook up to the fire hydrant. But yeah, I mean, you want to get the water to the fire as quick as you can. So that's typically, the county fire has a map of all the hydrants. So typically they can guide you to the closest hydrant before you even get on scene to let you know, hey, this hydrant's 100 feet to the west of this address or whatever. Gotcha. So you kind of, you know, the engineer that's driving the truck, in their head, they kind of know what they're going to have to stretch and lay. But yeah, I mean, it can get to be a challenge in some of the more rural areas where you don't have hydrants kind of like we have them in Harvest. So,
and then you were just saying that on the commercial side, they need to have stuff you can tap into within the building or in the structure.
Yeah. Most of the structures, I mean, will have, you know, sprinkler systems or rather systems that you can hook a hose into, so you're not having to carry a line from an engine all the way up into an apartment. But yeah, I mean, that's also where, like I said, a ladder truck comes in helpful too, because, you know, they've got the ability to get on top of the structure, have a nozzle sometimes on the ladder. They can spray down in there and get some water on the fire as quick as they can.
So this next one's interesting. This might be more of an exercise of what's going on, but kind of describe what you see here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's at an airport. You know, just based off the structure on the right, looks like it'd probably be an airplane of some sort. And typically the airport fire engines or the rescue vehicles have those nozzles in the front because the heat's so intense. They try to get what they can on there. Usually with any kind of fire like that, that's probably got fuel mixed in with it. You know, we've got foam that we put on it because water's just going to spread it around and it's not going to put it out. So for us, I mean, to translate that into kind of what we do, you know, if you've got a vehicle fire and there's fuel mixed in with that, you know, we've got foam that we carry to put on those to kind of put that out. But, you know, we've had vehicle fires before where gas has started to leak out of the bottom of the vehicle once the car's on fire. And, of course, the fire just travels down the little line of gas. And so you'll be looking down and you just see like a stream of fire just kind of flowing down. And so then that's when you got to bust the foam out and and put it on there. So
okay. And here we got, looks like an attic fire.
Yeah. And you know, a big indicator for people to keep in mind when they see smoke is, you know, dark black smoke like that's a problem. That's how you know you got a real situation on your hands. It's one of those things that, you know, people see smoke and they see white smoke and they sometimes kind of freak out about it. They see it driving down the road or something. You know, it's usually nothing more than somebody burning brush or something. But when you see thick black smoke, that's a good indicator that you've got a serious problem and that fire is really, as we call, chugging. It's getting some energy behind it and it's consuming a lot of fuel. So that would end up being, if you pulled up and saw that, people would be concerned. I mean, that would be another big one. You know, you got flames shooting out the side, but just the thick black smoke that you see would be a good indicator that it's a pretty serious fire.
Is it also the speed at which I'm under the understanding that you might look at a fire and you're kind of looking to see what smoke is moving the quickest, and that might be more of an issue or an indicator of where your bigger problem is?
Yeah, typically, you know, the guys base it off of the height of the smoke when you get in. You know, if smoke's real low, typically an indicator it's going to be a problem. You know, you got flashovers and stuff that occur inside structures where guys can walk in. You know, it's gotten hot in there, the fire flashes over, and that's how firefighters usually get hurt, is because it's an area that's not on fire, and with the heat, it combusts while they're in there, and that's when you've got problems. We had a guy that was involved in one of those a few years back. Thankfully, you know, he was okay for the most part, but that was a defining moment in our department, because that was when we really focused more on training and learning how to deal with those conditions before they get to be at that point, and try to prevent that from happening. And so even him personally, that's been his big mission with our department, is having our guys know what to look for, how to kind of predict what the fire is going to do. And then, like I said, really the key is getting water on the fire just to prevent those things from happening. So, I mean, there's a lot of science and a lot of tactics behind it. You know, before I got involved with it, I was like, oh, you just put some water on it, whatever. And I mean, there's a lot. And I mean, it's, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't take it as serious as they should. But like I said, something that makes us unique at Harvest is that we spend a lot of time, training on that stuff, studying that stuff. So Jake is our guy that does that. So shout out Jake. Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's something that we take serious. So.
This next one is very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to tease it. And as we're going to transition here in a little bit and talk maybe a little bit more about kind of being an EMT or that type of thing. But in general, right, every call is different and unique, right?
Yeah.
And you have no idea what's about to happen. And I'm sure you constantly, after it's over, like, I can't believe I just witnessed that, right?
Yeah.
Or I just saw that, and or that was strange, or you can't make these things up, those types of phrases. But I'm looking at this picture and I'm thinking, well, okay, something weird went on with this roof, but it's kind of like I might have to lower this. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, I can see the top of the roof.
It's just
right
almost
there.
like the roofers came and they caught the shingles on fire.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, how often does this happen?
I mean, to me, that would be a first. The fires that I've seen, I don't think I've ever seen the top of the roof on fire. Now, it could be something where the whole back of the house is, the fire has gone through the roof there and it's just extended to the shingles. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see that there's not a lot of smoke coming out of anywhere else, and it just appears to be from that picture just right there on the shingles. But yeah, I mean, that's, we always, in the military, that was a saying, but especially for the fire service and for EMS, I mean, complacency kills. If you go in thinking it's going to be like everything you've run before, that's when it'll get you,
How, so looking at that little MG he has in the garage.
Yeah.
I'm assuming at times you might show up and you have a homeowner being like, make sure that whatever happens, nothing happens to that car.
Yeah.
And you probably just want to punch him at that point.
I mean, honestly, we don't. I mean, if it's a fire like that and everybody's out of the structure, we've got enough personnel, there's no threat of it extending to another structure anywhere else. If they're able to communicate to us where valuables are, or a case like that where his car is in the garage and it appears undamaged so far, we'll do what we can to try to protect that. That's kind of the other aspect of it, is protecting life and property, and so in that order. And so, if the life's protected, if we've got it under control, don't walk up when we first get there and say, "Hey, save my car." But if there's a lot of times when the fire's still going, that we'll have other crews that are going in that are looking for pictures, looking for valuables, firearms. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we'll try to go in and get out for people if we can. So I mean, and even for calls where maybe an electrical fire or something that's in a wall, and we've got to use some hooks and bust open some sheetrock, we'll try to put down tarps and stuff just to prevent any extra damage that we don't have to cause. So like I said, it's really call depending, but once the fire is contained and we feel like we're doing some work on it, especially with that guy's car, it's not burned up, didn't look like there's a lot of damage. I mean, you could probably do what you could to help him out a little bit with that. So
I didn't realize that. That's kind of good to know.
Yeah, I mean, firefighters are pretty good people for the most part. You know what I mean? Try to look out for people and help them out. Like I said, if you've got it contained, I mean, that's that last fire that we're having in Monrovia. I mean, there was some firefighters that were going in, and they weren't even being asked by the family. I mean, that house was a total loss. They lost everything, but they were. The fire was mostly contained, and so they were grabbing pictures and stuff that they were seeing in the living room of family members and stuff that they thought would just be valuable to the family, bringing it outside and setting it on the ground for them just to give them something, So,
all right, let's transition and let's talk about what happened last month.
Okay, yeah,
as it was posted. So here you are, you're working at your main job at First Stop, and a what do you call them?
Client.
Your client goes through cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
Here is the post.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're one to call attention to yourself, and
usually not. Yeah.
And just as you posted, they're like, I don't post a lot, but every now and then it is good to post this. But rather than read through it, can you just kind of summarize what happened?
Yeah. So we just normal day at the day center, just kind of the normal craziness there, just a lot of people in and out. This gentleman, he's pretty well known. He's just one of those guys that everybody knows. I mean, anybody that's coming to the day center, he talks a lot and he's a friendly guy, so most people know him. But I was in our office area working on some stuff, and heard one of the clients holler out that somebody's having a seizure. I've got my medical bag. It's fully stocked. It's the same bag that I actually carry with the fire department. So it's fully stocked. I got it ready to go at all times just for whatever. I mean, I do mostly at First Stop changing out bandages for people, checking blood pressure, stuff like that. But I carry all my equipment just because I'm a good boy and I like to be prepared. So said he was having a seizure. So and this gentleman's had some health problems. I've called HMZ for him a few times. So I walk out there and he's laying on his side. He presented like he could have been having a seizure. So, I walk up and
Is he someone who you see just about every day?
yeah, yeah. And so, and like I said, I'm pretty familiar with his medical history just because he's somebody I've consistently kind of checked his vitals and stuff for him, even without needing to call 911, just because he was wanting that kind of stuff checked. So, I go down to check him. He's on his side. Do the normal assessment on him, roll him on his back. And, when you've done this for a while, anybody that's listening that's, in medical field, you know a dead person when you see him. There's a pretty obvious transition that happens to somebody when they go from their heart beating to their heart not beating.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just lifeless. I mean, you can just tell when you've seen
temperature and color and everything.
Yeah. So when you've seen it enough, you know almost immediately. So, like I said, I got him on his back to check his vitals, and just one look at him, and I knew he was in cardiac arrest. So of course, checked for a pulse, didn't feel it. We've thankfully got an AED at first stop. I'll talk about that more in a second about the importance of all that. But had a coworker grab the AED for me. He called 911. So I went ahead and got started doing compressions. Worked him doing just compressions until Himsey got there. I think them and Huntsville Fire got there about the same time. So I let them know, some of the crews I know just from being in Harvest, some of them I don't know. So I just like to communicate to them that I'm an EMT, just so they don't think I'm just some random guy. Let them know I'm an EMT, and they get there, and, I start doing compressions, and Huntsville Fire got there, and I let them take over doing that, while I went to go intubate him. And so the advanced EMT that was there was getting the medications ready, getting all that prepped. Getting ready to put a line in him and get some of the epinephrine going, try to get his heart restarted. We were able to shock him a handful of times with the AED before Himsey got there. They got there, put their pads on him, continued to shock him, administer medication, and before we got him loaded on the stretcher, he had a pulse back, and he was looking around and was at least conscious, and still not obviously 100%, but he had a pulse and was looking around and able to communicate with us to a certain extent. So yeah, I mean, that was a matter of, maybe 10 or 15 minutes start to finish that, we were able to get a pulse back on him. So,
and is it kind of just standard procedure for you? Is there any extra adrenaline rush when something like that happens? I mean, I'm assuming those events are fewer and far between, but you just kind of go about it very surgically in a way, just kind of like just an old pro.
Yeah, I mean, it's CPR is pretty standard for most of us, especially like at Harvest. I mean, we do a lot of calls, do a lot of serious calls. I don't know how frequently we have full arrests, cardiac arrests, but I mean, it's frequent enough that you run a few and you know exactly what you're doing. So no, I mean, it wasn't any big deal to me. I mean, I knew exactly what I was doing. Like I said, I've got my bag with all my stuff in it. And I'm a CPR instructor too. So, I mean, part of that too is just like ingrained in my head anyways,
right.
Outside of doing that. But, the only thing that was different was being the person that witnessed it. 'Cause typically we get called after it's happened. And so, you're kind of having to play catch up at that point. So being on the scene first and witnessing it and being able to call 911 was a little bit different perspective for me.
Gotcha.
But I mean, once you get started, most of it for us is just muscle memory. You know what you're doing. I think I don't want to say that we like running cardiac arrest, but in my opinion, it's one of the more simpler things that you can run for a call, because it's pretty straightforward. I mean, they don't have a heartbeat, don't have a pulse, so your goal is to try to restore that. And so, I mean, you've got a pretty standard protocol for doing compressions, doing ventilations, AED, administering medication, and getting them to the hospital as quick as you can. So, I mean, it's, those calls I think we like because everybody's got a role. We know how to do it well.
Yeah.
So that was like a little bit different because I was by myself. Once Himsey Huntsville Fire got there, it was a little bit better, having some other trained people there with me.
Yeah.
But, I'm used to walking in with 2 or 3 guys with me that know what we're doing. So that was a little bit different, but
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You want to hear a cool story?
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Captain Phillips?
No, I haven't. No.
It's really good. So Tom Hanks is the captain of the Maersk, Alabama cargo ship, right? And they go around the Horn of Africa, and it's all about Somali pirates. And so not to ruin it, but at the end, of course, the SEALs come and save the day and all that. But so in the end, they bring him back onto this whatever ship, Navy ship. I don't know if it was a battleship or what that came and actually where they performed the operation and assassinated all the pirates and stuff. And they bring Tom Hanks on board to go through a triage and get treatment. And they used real Navy staff, and they said, listen, we're shooting a movie in a couple of days or whatever, and some of you are going to be involved in performing triage, and we want you just to go about, and they didn't tell them who the actor was. They didn't tell them anything about the movie.
Yeah.
They said, just at some point during the day, be ready. And while this person is an actor, you go about it as if it was a normal patient.
Yeah.
And there was a few other things that they did in that movie, and the way they just directed it and stuff, where it helped it be just more authentic.
Yeah.
But yeah, in he comes, and you just sit there on, as a viewer and watching this. I don't know if it's a nurse or a doctor, just go through the motions.
Yeah.
And they're asking the patient the normal questions they normally, and just go into the procedure.
Right.
And I'm sure that at some point they didn't even think about the fact that they were in a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Just
they were
day.
just doing their job.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's neat. Yeah. And this gentleman that, I actually got to see him Monday for the first time since that happened. He came back in the day center. Unfortunately, his situation didn't change just because of that. And, so, I mean, that's something that, as our organization, still working to help him and kind of picking back up where we left off, a few months ago. But I mean, he came in for the first time, and, he's got a wife that's with him, and, she gave me like it's like a little angel lapel pin, it's like a little guardian angel thing. So,
that's cool.
So I mean, I clipped that on my bag. It's just kind of maybe a good luck charm or something. But
yeah,
I mean, it's first time seeing him, and I mean, he's in rough shape. I mean, it's hard for your body to go through that. The cause of his was some blocked arteries. So I mean, they got that fixed at the hospital. But yeah, I mean, it's the first time seeing him. So that was another unique thing is, with the fire department, you typically don't get to see those patients. Sometimes we do, if we get a save, sometimes they'll come back to the station a few months later and thank us and stuff. But typically, you don't get those interactions of now, like you're going back to seeing that person every day. So that was unique getting to do that Monday.
So on the, that's kind of on the EMT side, but going back to talking about fire, is there a time where you showed up to a scene and you're like, oh my goodness, like not even sure where to start here? Can you walk through any of that circumstance and kind of what that felt like? And, certainly you have probably eventually snapped into it, but what was the scene like where it kind of stopped you in your tracks a little bit and caused you some pause?
I mean, there's been a few. I think for me, typically it happens on wrecks where you've got multiple patients, or you've got multiple patients that are entrapped, and then just normal patients that are not entrapped, but everybody's injured. And sometimes you're the first person there and you're there by yourself for a little bit. And so, you throw in factors like it's nighttime and it's raining. And so all that stuff really kind of affects your decision making. And with as busy as HIMSI is in the county and in the city right now, sometimes you don't always have the right number of ambulances coming that you need. So you've got to figure out, which patients, you have a little bit of triage. You got to figure out which patient's higher priority, and got to figure out how you're going to get some of these patients out of these vehicles that are stuck.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's been numerous of those calls where we've walked up and seen that. I think, it wasn't recent. I mean, it's been a couple years now. But we always kind of joked that it was like a Hollywood movie set. We pull up on this call. It's been a head-on collision. One of the cars is on fire. And about 10 or 12 feet away from this car that's on fire is a guy that's laying in the road that's barely hanging on to life. And so we get there, and a couple of the guys get to work on the vehicle fire. Me and another guy start working on the patient. And so that one was pretty wild because it's nighttime. You've got a car that's on fire. You've got patients in the other car that were involved that are hurt. And then you've got this guy that's laying in the middle of the road that, is in very, very bad shape. So, he was somebody that we found out later actually had an internal decapitation. And he survived. We got him to the hospital. He got situated and went through whatever he needed to do there and made it out. But that was a unique one, just being on the ground for that. Like I said, there's a lot of going on. It's kind of one of the perfect storm calls for a fire department. You've got a fire and you've got a patient that's seriously injured. But hearing later on that he was suffering from a major injury like that a lot of people don't even make it through to begin with, was one, a testament, I think, to the care that we provided for him, but two, it's just an interesting call.
Wow.
But, we run a lot of shootings too. I mean, we get paged out to those and those happen.
There was a double homicide the other day, right? Isn't there?
Yeah. And that was in the county. So yeah, I mean, there's, we had a similar call in Harvest, not that many patients, but it was a year or two ago that was at an event venue very similar to that. Somebody was having like a concert or something there. But yeah, I mean, there was like 3 or 4 people ended up getting shot, and this was the middle of the night, and it was me and another guy that went. And so, I mean, yeah, we got there before Himsey did. So, I mean, we're having to, in the middle of the night, and these were like, high school kids. They were, 16, 17 years old. Some of them been shot multiple times. And so we're out there trying to triage, figure out what's going on, who's the highest priority. And then once Himsey gets there, kind of getting them directed on who's where and who we need to load up next. So, I mean, the calls where you've got multiple patients, I think, are the ones that typically can be sometimes a little bit more difficult to deal with, because you got to figure out who's in the worst shape and who needs to go first.
Here's a picture you sent me.
Yeah.
So this is daytime, but what's going on here?
Yeah. So this was on Highway 53. There was a vehicle that had flipped over in a ditch. In Harvest especially, we're kind of notorious for having like these 20-foot drainage ditches just everywhere, man. It's crazy.
Right.
So when vehicles go off, they go off in a dramatic fashion. So yeah, this vehicle's upside down. The lady was entrapped. That's me there in a t-shirt with no gear on. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the first priority. I think on that call might have been the first one there. So the first thing is kind of getting down there, seeing what you're working with, seeing what's going on, checking on the patient. In those situations, you're pretty limited on what medical care you can provide while they're upside down in a car like that. So, made sure she was stable for the most part, did what I could do for her. Then, when you're the first one there, your main goal is kind of getting resources on scene. So letting the other guys know, hey, I need a rescue truck and need extrication equipment. We've got the rescue squad here in town. They're another volunteer service. So they respond to all entrapments in the county and in the cities. And so they're another big resource that's volunteer based. They do 12-hour shifts. So I mean, they're maybe better staffed than we are, where they always have a crew there with their truck ready to go. But it's another resource that you got to keep going. But yeah, I mean, we were able to get her out. She wasn't hurt too seriously, thankfully.
I'm sure they were busy. What was it? Just after Christmas with the storm.
Yeah.
Cars just all over the place, sliding off the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, they're a big resource. I mean, they're the whole county, and then for Huntsville and Madison City too. So I mean, they're coming if there's a wreck with entrapment, and but they're a big resource because they've got a lot more toys to play with than what most of the county departments have by themselves. So
yeah, let's while I have it up, let's cruise through some of these other pictures. Again, these are ones that you provided to me, and I think it'd be. Now we're going to kind of touch on. I think there's some stuff from your deployments. Yeah, but it's one thing to pull a picture from the internet and say, hey, talk about it. It's another one that's actually from you and in a part of the world that most of us will never see. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to get your commentary. So let me just cycle back to what I think is the beginning of where I want to start this. Let's see. Actually, this might be recent because it's the same hat. Pull this up. Yeah. Is this at First Stop? Yeah. Okay.
So that's at our day center that's set up at 2820 Governor's Drive right now. We're subleasing a space from a church that's over there. But yeah, this was a day that we'd gotten a bunch of donations in. We were getting stuff loaded up for the outreach team to take out to some of the camps. So, just breaking open boxes, kind of seeing what, in those we've got snack packs, which is just like some basic food items and stuff that we take out to some of the camps. We try to take out a whole bunch of stuff to the camps that are close by to the day center because we want to encourage people to come to the building. So they've got to talk with us, interact with staff, right? Kind of hear what we have to say, and we don't want to contribute to some of the littering problems out there. But some of the camps a little bit further out from us, we will take some basic resources out there to them just to make sure they have what they need.
One fact that Jessica shared was at times they'll move everyone and then just basically bulldoze the area, and you'll never even know there was a camp there.
Yeah, yeah. There's quite a few areas in town, and typically those get involved with property owners that own that land that they haven't given those people permission to be there. Right. And of course, Huntsville City has a lot of ordinances, of course, with not being able to just open up a tent and camp where you want to. So So yeah, but yeah, there's quite a few areas in town where there used to be camps that there's not anymore because of those reasons. So yeah.
You're wearing the same hat you're wearing right now.
That's my go-to hat. What can I say?
All right, here's another shot.
Yeah, so that was Jessica did a story on the gentleman that was in cardiac arrest. So she had me pose for some pictures with some of my equipment. But yeah, I mean that's my medical bag right there, the big black bag.
So this goes along with the story that we just had on LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that's a pocket BVM bag valve mask. It's used to do respirations. If you've ever watched any Hollywood show, it's the face piece they put on you with the big bag. Do ventilations for the patient. And then the green thing that's kind of right there on the table is what we call an eye gel. So it's an intubation tool. We call it a supraglottic airway. It just kind of slides right in, seals off your your airway so you can get air into the lungs. So it's a pretty simple device to use, but it's a big game changer for a lot of us. So that way you can ventilate the patient a little bit easier.
Okay. Actually, as a quick aside, it's so ironic that today let me switch here. Today I posted episode 44, which was Thad, my buddy. I've known him for a long time, and I'd had him on the show previously. His brother was killed in Afghanistan, and so they have a foundation. And But since he had been on the show before, it was kind of just more one of those episodes where sometimes the guest will ask me a bunch of questions, or just because I've known him a long time, he'll like, hey, I was just curious, about these things, and get to know more about me, but it's ironic because I showed in that episode, I showed pictures of the 2nd-degree burn I got on my leg.
Oh, wow.
My son lit me on fire.
Oh, jeez.
On accident, but it's gasoline. And I went down to the Birmingham Burn Center, and the stat that they shared with me was, I want to say it was like 75%. And this is a doctor that's been practicing medicine for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I think he's been in the burn specialty for 15 to 20 years. And he's like 75% of all burn patients is from gasoline accidents or just gasoline, right? And now here you are, from the volunteer fire department on the day that I released an episode about my burn. Jeez. But in that I cautioned viewers like, hey, I'm going to show some pictures. Now they're severe 2nd-degree burns. They're not 3rd-degree burns. And quite frankly, when I watch like The Good Doctor, and I know there's tons of medical shows, but for some reason we've started watching The Good Doctor, which came out like in 2017 on Hulu or whatever. There's surgery scenes at times where like I have to turn away when they open up and you're seeing on the organs and stuff. But like I can look at my burned leg, but it's hard for me to look sometimes at the organs, right? When they're operating on someone.
Yeah. Hey, burns are rough, man. I mean, that's if you've never seen a bad burn, it's a game changer when you see it. I mean, I think if more people, had some exposure to that, they may take some things a little bit more serious. But I mean, gasoline is what gets people. I would agree with him. It's a big factor for a lot of people when they get serious burns.
What was really cool about seeing this doctor too was I had to go to the burn center 3 times down in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And the first 2 times, the doc, once I was they call it debriding.
Yeah.
Right, and that really hurts, and they're just picking at your leg and trying to get all the dead skin and just trying to make sure there's no infection.
Yeah.
And then eventually a doctor comes in and gives you an assessment. And at the first 2 visits, it was still a little unclear, would I need grafts, and would this heal correctly? And both of those doctors were a little earlier in their career. So they end up talking to you for a while because whatever, they're practicing medicine, and that's fine.
Yeah. And
they want to cover all their bases. Well, the 3rd time I go, I see this pro. And he looks at it for literally 2 seconds, like, you'll be fine by Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was like 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And then we talked about other things. But you can tell he has seen
a lot,
thousands of burns, right? And he just was like, yeah, okay, I've seen that.
Yeah. It's
going to heal, by this amount of time. And there's no concern. You don't need skin grafts. You're good.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy.
All right, here we go. Now we get into your deployment. So this is a beautiful part of the world, isn't it?
Oh, that's we were in Kuwait there. That was, if I remember correctly, that was when we were doing one of the training ranges. Like I said, at that point, we knew we were going to be doing the protective security detail.
Mm-hmm.
So they had they've got a bunch of ranges and shoot houses down there getting people ready to go into Iraq or Afghanistan. So I mean, I think that was right when we were doing one of the PSD schools while we were down there. So they kind of had us out in the middle of the desert, at one of the training ranges. And, there was like little hut looking things out there that we stayed in. But I mean, yeah, that was
It's like watching Star Wars. Like,
dude, it was
know what
wild.
I mean?
That was the first time, of course, I'd ever been in a desert. We were in Mosul in northern Iraq, so it really wasn't a lot of desert. But yeah, being in Kuwait and driving out there to those ranges, I mean, that was the first time driving on like sand and driving those big up armored Humvees. I mean, that was a challenge.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, being out there and seeing some of that stuff, it was surreal. I mean, it was strange, like having to only pretty much do movements at nighttime because it's too hot during the day. And yeah, I mean, that was an experience. But yeah, I mean, looking back at it, it was pretty unique, man.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so those that was when we were in Iraq, and so that was on our compound. But by the time I got over there, the MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush protected vehicles, were starting to get rolled out and were pretty popular instead of the Humvees. Their big thing is they've got the V-shaped holes on the bottom, so if you get hit by an IED, the blast is deflected upwards. It's not like a Humvee where it's flat and you're just getting blasted by all of it.
Right.
And then most of those obviously have some up armor on them to kind of keep you protected from, what we were having at the time was, they were using some old Russian anti-tank grenades, but basically explosively formed penetrators that are in there. So there's kind of a beveled out metal plate of some sort, usually copper, with explosive behind it. So when they detonate it, it's basically shooting molten, metal, and it'll go through just about anything. So that's really what we were seeing a lot of. So, most of those MRAPs had this kind of protection on them. Then on the front, there was all sorts of weird stuff back then that, we'd slap on vehicles, but those were rollers that were meant to detonate any IEDs that were in front of the vehicle. So it got the roller instead of getting the vehicle itself. So usually the lead vehicle in the convoy.
Is it also doing some of its own detection?
We had what we called rhinos. I think on some of the other pictures they may be on there, but those were, infrared devices that were hooked up on the front. That was just like a big, metal pole with a wooden box that it would try to trigger some of those devices. But no, with those, I mean, it was basically a dumb device. You hook it up and it just was meant to roll over anything that was going to blow up. So we didn't use them often if we were in the city, but if we were going down highways, going to some of the other remote areas, some of the squads would put those on the front of the MRAPs and roll with it.
And here you are going down the highway.
Yeah, that was one of the highways. I can't remember. That may have just been one of the missions that we're going out to one of the further out cities, some little areas outside Mosul that we would travel to. But yeah, those in the front, you've got the Max Pro MRAP that's got the rollers on it. And then these other two vehicles were what we called the Caymans. And so they were just a different kind of MRAP. But you can see the second one in the stack right there has got that external armor, a little bit of extra protection on it. And then the weird, roller coaster looking thing on the top is basically like a wire mitigation device. If there's a lot of low hanging wires you're driving through the city, and if you don't have those on there, the wires get hung up on the turrets and everything else. So those are meant to basically have the wires kind of be guided up over the vehicle, so they're not getting hung up. So those were, random things that soldiers just invented while they were over there, just through decades of combat, and realizing that that was the best way to kind of avoid some bad situations. So that was I can't remember what it's called. It was like maybe Jonah's mosque or something. I mean, it was so in Mosul, the ancient city of Nineveh, which is in the Bible where Jonah went, is right across the Tigris River from Mosul, and so some of the ancient ruins of Nineveh were still up at that time. I think in 2014 when ISIS kind of had their run through there, they destroyed a lot of these things, which is unfortunate. But yeah, this was one of the mosques. I want to say this is what they refer to as Jonah's burial place, where according to their history, that's where he was buried, was on that site. But yeah, I mean, this was some of the sites you saw just coming back and forth from missions.
It's a big structure.
It was huge. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that, being from Alabama and going over there, I mean, stuff that I never thought I'd see before. But yeah, I mean, in that mission, we were using Humvees, depending on where we needed to go in the city, depending on what vehicle we were using. Yeah. Some of the areas, and especially they were going back and forth across some of the bridges, going across the river. It was easier for the Humvees to get across than it was for the MRAPs. So, we had those as well that we rolled out, but typically try to stick with the MRAPs when we could. It's me doing my thing. Yeah.
Are those Oakley gloves? Are those Oakley branded?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was back in the heyday when Oakley was like super cool, and they made wasn't like a lot of people making tactical gear. So them and a few other companies had kind of the market on the tactical stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you got the Oakley gloves, you were super cool.
That's
so,
cool stuff, man.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I got promoted sergeant while I was over there, so
Okay.
I got to shift kind of from being a driver to being the team leader, getting to sit in the passenger seat. So that was, yeah, I guess probably sometime after that. So I think I was like maybe 21 when that picture was taken. So
Now here you're distributing aid.
yeah, so some of the PSD stuff that we did, like you can see the gentleman down there in the uniform. That was one of the colonels that we were there protecting. So near one of the police stations that we would go to, there was a school, and so that was just part of the Hearts and Minds deal. Was going to some of these areas and dropping off aid. Just showing good faith, and of course, you've got the Iraqi police that are there to also kind of include them in it as well, to let the community and let the people there know that the police were on their side, whether that was always the case or not. But
It's amazing. I was thinking about just the first picture we looked at when you were unboxing, the stuff for First Stop. And there's few better feelings than when you've got supplies and resources showing up, right? And you've got boxes to open, and you've got people who are going to consume those things that need them.
yeah,
What an awesome feeling.
yeah. And over there, I mean, there's probably a lot of people with similar experiences, but anything you could do for the kids over there,
Yeah.
I mean, that was always big. And that's still something I do with the fire department. I carry around little fire helmets and bracelets and stuff in the back of my car to pass out
Yeah.
for on calls with kids, even if it's nothing serious. I mean, just to give them something. But I mean, I did that in Iraq too. Like we would get gift bags and boxes from people all the time because, of course, you're deployed and people just want to send you all the stuff. So I mean, we'd always have plenty of extra things that we would take on missions and pass out. But I mean, there's another picture, I couldn't find it, but of me with two little girls, where I'd given them some dolls or something that we'd come across. And that was one of those things that when I was over there that I enjoyed doing. These are people that didn't ask to be put in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's sad to look back now and see those kids, because again, that's 2011 or 2010 when that picture was taken. And
Are they adults now? Or
yeah,
they,
there's a lot that's happened. Like I said, when ISIS kind of had their run through Mosul in 2013, I mean, that was our 2014. That was pretty rough for most of us, because I mean, that was an area that we saw a lot of pride in completing your mission there, and thinking about all the people that you came in contact with that were probably hurt or killed during that. So yeah, that's one of the gates of Nineveh. I can't remember how many there was altogether, maybe like 6, I think. But this was next to one of the police stations that we would go to, and I mean, it's a huge structure. It's massive, and that thing is thousands of years old. And so that was one of the things that I appreciated about being there, was getting to see some of the historical stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at stuff that especially if you're a Christian, you're hearing the story of Jonah, and that's where he was. Like you're looking at those ruins, and inside of those gates would have been where he was at. And so, that stuff was always cool. And inside of there, they had some, because it's so close to police station, you can see the gates in front of it. But I mean, they did what they could back then to protect it even. And so there was a few times that we got to go in there and look at some of the artifacts they had. They have some of the old sculptures that were kind of on the back side of that. But yeah, I mean, that's all stuff that, to my knowledge, is now destroyed because ISIS, can't let anything be in their way that has any history other than their own. So yeah, that's one of the sad things looking back. But I mean, it was cool getting to see that stuff back then.
Absolutely. It looks like here's your team.
Yeah, that was some of the guys in the squad. So that was at one of our police stations that was right on the Tigris River. So that's it behind us.
Are you the third from the left?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was some of the guys, and it sounds cliche, but some of the best guys I've ever known that
Sure.
wouldn't have done anything for each other. So
Your brothers.
yeah, so that was me and my buddy Shane. We one of the days just had like you had civilians that worked over there as contractors, and so one of the guys that would come out with us was like a police advisor, but he did photography as well. So on some of the missions, when he would come out with us, he would take pictures for his photography stuff. So it ended up being cool because back then, like, I mean, you had iPhones, but I mean, we were like, I was rolling out with like a digital camera to like take pictures while I was over there. So
Right.
So it was cool having somebody that had like a professional camera that he would come out and just kind of do like some stage pictures of us. Because for a lot of people in those deployments, you didn't get pictures. You're too busy doing stuff. So I mean, it was cool that he set aside time to make sure that he was getting cool pictures of us and kind of document what we were doing. And then also, you know, he just had them for his photography business too.
Well, and someone like me, I appreciate seeing your tactical gear.
Yeah.
You know, and just your whole setup and your kit and everything else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What goes into it. Okay. And I think I think this is your. Now we're back at First Stop.
Yeah, so that was at the warming center that we had last year. The outreach team went over there, so we had the 2 case managers that were meeting with people that maybe we hadn't seen before, or people that we hadn't seen in a while. This gentleman in particular, I've known him for a while from when I was at the mission, but he was at the warming center. He's just wanting his blood pressure checked. So, you know, like I said, I always have my bag and stuff with me if somebody wants something. So I was just helping him out and checking on him. So
cool. And then I think here you're doing some instruction.
Yeah, so this was we had a group that they work with young men in the community to try to help kind of develop them into men and kind of get them on the right track in life. So they had reached out to us to see about doing like a first aid class for them. So Calhoun was nice enough to let us use their facility that day. So me and a couple of the guys went over there and taught that class for them. So that's, you know, that's a class that I teach still. It's a good class. It's called First on the Scene, First Aid. So it covers major bleeds, overdoses, cardiac arrest, AED use, allergies. I mean, it's a good course. It's a course that I typically go to teach people if they're asking me for first aid or for CPR. It's kind of my go-to because it covers everything. But yeah, I mean, just as a side note, I can't say enough about people getting the right training, and that's something that I'm passionate about, is training people in CPR and first aid.
Were these kids responsive?
You had a few that were. I mean, you know, typical what you'd expect of like high school or middle school age boys. You know, it's a Saturday morning, so most of them don't want to be there, kind of be made to be there. But you had quite a few that were very interested in it. You know, after we did the classroom portion, we did the hands-on where we let them practice doing CPR, let them on the mannequins, let them practice doing like wound packing for like trauma on some of the simulators that we have. So we tried to make it interactive. So, you know, the classroom portion, some kids had some really good questions. They were interested in stuff, but a lot of them kind of perked up once they got to do the hands-on and got to be a little bit more active.
Now this looks like more of a adult crowd here.
Yeah, so this was actually at First Stop. This was, I think this was last year, but I still do it. HPD has the crisis intervention team training that they do for their officers. So they've got a standard 8-hour class that they do for everybody that goes through the academy. So they learn how to deal with people that are in a mental health crisis. And then they've got this, I think it's 40-hour course that it's voluntary, but if they want to go through it, they can. And so it helps them, they become CIT certified. So it helps them, you know, like I said, learn the resources that are in town, learn how to deal with somebody that's in a mental health crisis. So they've had me step in to do kind of like the homeless portion of that. So letting people know kind of about, and I mean, most of the officers know, but letting them know about the homeless population and mainly letting them know about us and other resources that are out there. And, you know, how to connect people to those resources that are homeless. So, you know, being able to give them some options as law enforcement, to sometimes handle things, and maybe not such a confrontational way. You know, they let them know they can contact us to come out there and talk with somebody if they're needing help. So that's been a fun thing I've gotten to do over the last year. And like I said, I think about once a quarter we do a class with them where I'll go out there or they come to First Stop and get a tour and get to learn kind of what we're doing. So,
well, I appreciate you sending those pictures over.
Yeah,
and I think that helped summarize a lot of what in picture form, right? A lot what we talked about. All right, so now you said that you like all kinds of music.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
like how far back?
Dude, I listen
like all the way back, like to the 60s.
Sure. I mean, I'll listen to anything. I don't think I'm picky. I mean, I think anything that pops up, I'll listen to it at least once.
Do you want to try your hand at name that tune?
Oh, dude, I'll do terrible at it, but I can try.
Good, because so I realize, like, just the older I get, how out of touch I am with I don't know. Most of it's just like, I don't know. I can't. There's just too many bands and there's too many songs and and I guess I don't know. I saw some social media post and it was like a company highlighting one of their employees and they're doing this thing where the employee then kind of shares their top 10 songs on their playlist. Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know any of those bands and maybe I've heard the song on the radio, right? But I don't know any of the titles. Now I know stuff back in 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, but I'm just increasingly unaware.
Yeah. New stuff I definitely don't know. I mean, I'm bad at like remembering band names anyways, but I don't know. Like I'm the kind of person I'll just get on Spotify, just click on a random playlist and just let it go. Especially if I'm working out or something like where I want some entertainment, I'll just click on something maybe I don't normally listen to and just see what happens. So
I'm always amazed. Like I'll run the Bradford Creek Trail over here, and I've been doing that too. I just do like a random playlist, and sometimes I'd have to stop and say, I love this song. I've never heard of it. And sometimes it's a band that I've heard and I just never heard the song, or it'll be a complete surprise, and then I'll add it to song. Like I can't lose that. I really like that song. Right. Okay. So let's see here. This is quite a mix.
Okay. Oh boy.
But I don't know. There's a little bit of pressure at times where I'm like, am I picking good songs or the right songs? Because sometimes it seemingly seem too hard. For the guest, and then sometimes it's too easy.
Yeah. Oh, but see, I'm nervous now.
Now, unlike Real Name That Tune is, hey, can you name this in the first 2 or 3 chords?
Right.
Notes, right? This is more, it's as fast as you can. Title or artist. Okay. Now, some of these they're going to give the title right away because they mention it like in the first couple words.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I don't know. I just love music. So this is a fun segment because it just reminds me how much I love music. All right, let me find. Here it is. It's under your last name, Gilbert. That's the name of the playlist. We're ready for Name That Tune.
I'm ready for it. Let's go.
And again, you don't have to. All you have to do is stop me when you know the title or the artist.
Okay.
Oh, here's an oldie but goodie. I hope you get this one.
Oh boy.
This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right. On time. It's tricky. It's so tight. Here we go.
I mean, I know. I don't know who sings it. Though. See, that's my problem. Is I know all these songs, no idea who sings it.
It's tricky from Run DMC.
Yeah.
I don't know why I keep doing that. All right, let's see here. All right, here we go.
Oh man, that's a "Life's a Highway" song.
Yeah, you got "Life's a
Highway." I don't know who
Highway.
it's by though, because they got
those people covered it.
Yeah.
Rascal Flatts covered it.
Yeah, that was the one.
Originally by Tom Cochran.
Yeah. See, I would have never guessed his name. Knew the song, but
yeah, me too.
It's one of those ones but.
And I think even didn't Joe Crocker? He might have even covered it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. That's like a go-to.
It's like one of those songs that like every other decade someone will cover it, and then you have no idea where it originated.
Yeah, it never dies. It just keeps coming back.
All right, let's give you an easy one.
Okay,
this is an easy one. Well, actually, you did a good job there. You got the title.
Oh, Free Fallin'.
Yeah.
But there's been some. I mean, it's Bon Jovi, isn't it? Who's
not Bon Jovi?
Who?
Wait till he starts singing.
Oh, what's his name? I don't know. I'm not gonna get it.
Tom Petty.
Tom Petty. That's it.
But you heard it.
Yeah. Well, that's another one that's been covered a lot too by a lot of people because I know. Yeah. I know John Mayer did one. I don't know, years ago.
Here's another one you should recognize right away.
Shook Me All Night Long. Is that AC/DC?
AC/DC.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, I got some of those.
All right, here we go. Now it's gonna get a little more tough. Now we're gonna talk kind of modern day. You may not get this.
I have no idea. Not in a million years. I've never heard this song.
I actually just discovered this guy. Charlie Puth.
Never even heard of him.
This dude is like he's a student of music. Like he's from Jersey.
Yeah.
He has a kind of, when he talks, he has kind of a deeper voice.
Yeah.
But he can hit all these different octaves.
It's crazy.
But he's just like a real historian of music.
Yeah.
And he's very gifted. All right. Let's see. Here we go. This lead singer has done some mighty drugs in his career.
Oh, Ozzy Osbourne, yeah.
Black Sabbath.
Yeah. See, that's another one. Like, I know the tune, but
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like sometimes they all run together too, you know?
See, I didn't know it was called Paranoid. I don't think I would have gotten that. All right, now let's see how you do with this one.
Oh, Dave Matthews. Man.
Oh, look at you.
Crash into me, man. Everybody's
look at
got that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's your jam, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to a good bit of their stuff. I mean, they were popular when I was in high school, so.
Okay.
That was.
All right, here comes one that I'm hoping you'll get.
Oh boy. Oh, semi-charmed kind of life. Third Eye Blind?
Yeah, look at you. All right, so
See, I
you're
got
kind of
that
more
one.
of a 90s alternative guy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I grew up with, I guess, more or less. So,
All right, I got one more
okay.
in that genre.
Oh, this is easy. All the small things. Yeah.
What brand?
Is it Blink 182?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. Me and one of my friends went through a Blink 182 kick
Did ya?
last year, so that was kind of like a reawakening of that
Yeah.
band for me. So yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, man. Let's do one more segment.
Okay.
It's gonna be the quick six. Right.
Okay.
Just kind of ask you 6 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. You're
Yeah.
kind of lucky. We're gonna hit all the games today. This is really the only thing I write out. By the way, true or false that 70% of all firefighters are volunteer firefighters? I think that was a statistic as of 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
I mean, I'd say it's probably true. I mean,
It's a huge number.
just for Madison County, you've got a lot more volunteer departments than you do paid. So
All right. Let me. So here's your question. First question.
Okay.
The quick six is you don't necessarily have to answer quickly.
Okay.
I call it the quick six. It's just 6 questions where we learn a little bit more about Andrew.
Okay.
Okay. So first question: do you, in the time that you were over when you were deployed, you're away from family, friends, did you carry around any sort of memento, any good luck charm, or just something that was a piece of home, or did you have anything like that you carried around?
yeah, there was my best friend's family made some silicone bracelet band. It was like yellow
Okay.
because that was like back when the Live Strong, all that stuff was
Right.
big. But it was a yellow bracelet that said "Pray for Drew," and so that was I had a lot of friends that wore those back here, and so they had sent me one. So I mean, I think that was something I wore pretty consistently the whole time that I was over there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing I had was, I don't remember where we got them from. It was somewhere before we deployed. There's a lot of charity groups back then that would just give you stuff. But they would take decommissioned or retired American flags and they would cut the stars out of them and they put it in like a little plastic bag. And so that was something that I always carried in my uniform was, it was just a flag from a star from an American flag that I usually kept in my pocket. Just one of those
That's cool.
good luck charms. So
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Second question. If you had to do it again, and you're a senior at Westminster Christian Academy, do you go to the National Guard?
no, when I was in, everybody always joked about going to the Air Force. And then when I got deployed, I saw how they had it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did an Air Force.
Air Force?
Yeah, I probably would have done something medical. Like I said, it was one of those things I didn't realize till I got out that I really enjoyed doing. And so looking back, I mean,
Right.
that's a heck of an opportunity getting in and having them pay for all the medical things that you want to do and get trained in. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, that probably would have been
Okay.
something different.
So we just saw the abomination of the college football final.
Yeah,
TCU just gets their doors blown off.
ridiculous.
And as we opened the show, I saw all this stuff, I guess, on Twitter, like even at halftime.
Yeah,
Like, wouldn't it have been better just to have Alabama play Georgia because they're the only team that possibly could beat Georgia?
yeah.
What is your remedy to the college football playoff? How did we fix this?
Look, I was watching the game the other night with one of my friends who's a big Georgia fan. Not a big Georgia fan. He is like the Georgia fan. And so that was something that, so kind of like with my friends, I've got him who's a big Georgia fan, then I've got 2 friends that are big Alabama fans.
Right.
Like obnoxiously so. Right. And I told them, I think you've got Division I college football. And I think this is like halfway a joke, but it's like you've got to make another division of college football that's south of the Mason-Dixon.
It's like semi-pro.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the solution. Like, you got to have a championship for that division.
Yeah.
And then you got to have a championship for everybody else. Because, I mean, even if it would have
Yeah.
been Michigan, there's no way. There's no way anybody would have survived Georgia this year. Other than, I don't even know if Alabama would have. I'll say Alabama wouldn't have just to make people mad.
Yeah.
John, in case you're listening, taking up for Georgia. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have expected any other result from any other team, but at least somebody, maybe Alabama, could have put up a fight. We could have had an entertaining game.
Yeah.
Other than that, because that was embarrassing.
You bring up a really interesting point, and I've observed this. I've observed it when my son went to state wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
The guy whoever the guy is that wins his weight class is dominant, and whoever like finishes runner up like might be able to beat that guy. I don't know, 3 out of 10 times, and then everyone else, not a prayer.
Yeah.
They're never going to beat the second place guy, and they're never going to beat the first place guy.
Yeah.
Which means they're just kind of on a different level,
Yeah.
right? And then you see in football, which I think is a lot of just recruiting that goes around the country, right? Where even in public schools, somehow, some way, the best talent gets fed to a small number of schools, and they just dominate their schedule, right? Where it's just there's so much, it's just there's just an imbalance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I've seen it over and over because I used to cover, I used to broadcast games, and I got really involved in preparing for games, and especially when we got in the playoffs and who's who and what's what.
Yeah.
And you could just predict it.
Yeah.
You could just predict when, and then not even the private schools who are like the nationally recognized, the best schools. I mean, well, they're in a league by themselves. They might as well be playing college teams.
Yeah.
They're that good, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you bring up a good point. Like outside of the top 10, no one has a chance of winning the national championship. It's probably within the top 8.
Yeah.
The top 8 at a minimum need to be in the playoff.
Yeah.
Of which, of course, then Alabama would have been in the playoff, and maybe it would have come down to them in Georgia.
Right.
But yeah, they've got to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I mean, until Nick Saban stops producing his little coach spawns, I mean, it's like it's just going to keep happening. You know what I mean? You get people that coach for him that just learn how to be good coaches.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that Kirby Smart couldn't have done that without Nick Saban, but I mean, I think there's something to be said that, you know, these people that are coming out from under his leadership are producing champions, you know?
Well, and I tell you, even though they're not SEC, I'm extremely excited to see Arch Manning go to Texas and then Coach Prime at Colorado, because that these are going to be game-changing things.
Yeah.
And probably more so at Colorado, because that's a whole system versus just Arch.
Right.
But I mean, I literally think Dion, I should go put money on this in Vegas. Not this coming season,
Right.
but they will win the next season.
Yeah.
Or they will be in the playoff.
Yeah.
They're going to be that good.
And you need some diversity.
Especially with the
in it, too.
transfer portal now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's getting, you know, I don't care
People just wanna
who
play-
you're a fan of, but it's like it gets old after a while of just the same couple of teams going through. So,
Who's your favorite athlete of all time?
Oof.
Any sport.
I don't even know if I have a favorite athlete. I mean, I think somebody that I could respect as a player, maybe, and not so much as a person, would be Tom Brady.
Yeah.
You know, he's kind of I don't know. I mean, I'd say we probably wouldn't be friends, but I think somebody that can be as disciplined as he is and do what he does consistently. I mean, even with them making the playoffs, I mean, having a terrible year, but they still make the playoffs. But it's like, you know, having that ability and having that skill, I think is there's something to be said for that. I mean, again, though, personality wise, I would probably not want anything to do with the man. But if we're talking about just strictly athlete, I mean, he's probably somebody that everybody could learn a little bit of something from.
Yeah.
I think, but favorite athlete to watch though, I mean, Derrick Henry's fun, you know, with the Titans. I think right now it's just, I don't know, that's just something fun to watch. I mean, even when they do terrible and make you sad because they have a losing season, it's like he's still fun to watch, and you know, something to be said for that too.
All right. So when you guys are at the station, at the Harvest Volunteer Fire Department, what's kind of the go-to meal? When someone's gonna splurge, or someone's gonna treat you to a lunch or a dinner.
Yeah.
What's kind of the go-to unanimous? We're gonna have this.
Yeah. I mean, we don't cook up there often, but there has been at least one time that we had an event up there, and my buddy Jake had his wife's family come up, and they're from Mexico, and we got authentic Mexican food, like authentic tacos.
Nice.
I'd never had those before, and dude, I have craved those ever since. And
awesome.
So, I mean, I would say it's not something we ever have often, but I mean, that would probably be a go-to if we were to have something. I think everybody would probably be on board with that, because that was like a big game changer, just having some authentic food. So
That's cool.
yeah.
All right. Oh yeah. So you mentioned you have this this new weird hobby of like plane tracking or spotting.
Yeah.
Is that like you're on the app and you're looking at who's coming in?
Yeah.
My son does that too.
Dude, I don't know what happened to me, but it's like one day I realized I could do it. And so I started doing it. And I mean, I don't know. It's like, we were at the beach earlier in the year. It's near some of the bases down there around Pensacola.
Yeah.
And they've got some training ranges out there. Some of them are ones that we used to go to when I was in the Guard, but they've got like the C-130s and AC-130s that go over there, and you can hear them just blowing stuff up all night. And I don't know, man, it's cool just opening up an app and seeing what they're doing, or even being in Madison. I mean, you get some of these big planes that fly through sometimes, and I don't know, instead of wondering like who they are and what they're doing, you click on them and see what's up. So
let me give you a so before I ask my question, let me give you a tip if you have never done this.
Okay.
So I went and saw the Blue Angels practice. I have a cat card. I can get on the base. And we went and saw them practice, and there's all these people, and it was cool. Well, the next day, quite by accident, we had rented a pontoon boat and went out into, was that Perdido Bay?
Yeah.
We saw the same show from our pontoon on the water. That was the way to do it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That was the way to do it.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that.
Yeah.
Just find out when they're practicing.
Just
Rent a
get
pontoon. Give yourself about 45 minutes to get out to where they are. And oh my goodness.
Yeah. Dude. I'd be all over that. That'd
was
be
incredible.
fun. Yeah.
So here's the question though. Now that you're in spotting planes, or is there a certain aircraft though that's grown on you?
Yeah. Man, this is nerdy. I mean, commercial aircraft don't really do it for me. Like, those are kind of boring, I think. But I've really grown to like the B-1 Lancer. It's a bomber.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just cool looking. Looks pretty sweet. Don't know anything about it other than it just looks cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got your cliche ones like an A-10 and stuff that like everybody likes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like the new AC-130. It's like the AC-130J. It's like their new, AC-130. I mean, I don't know. You read about it and the stuff that's in that plane and what it can do, and it's just this big old fat plane that just flies up there and just blows stuff up. I mean, it's like, I don't know. They just look cool, man. It's just, it's neat to think about that. But, I mean, I think what I like more in planes though is probably the helicopters. And I think that's one of the cool things being around here is, you get your fair share of Blackhawks and Chinooks and everything else flying around. So, that was when I was in Iraq, the Kiowas were still in use, and that was what we typically had for air support. They've retired them now, but that was out of helicopters. That's probably still one of my favorites as a Kiowa, just because I can vividly remember those pilots just being wild, man, just flying as low as they could, almost touching you. So,
all right. So this is the bonus question.
Okay.
And this comes from when Rogan interviewed this guy Pat McNamara, who I believe lives in Georgia. Do you know who he is?
I love Pat Mac. He is, he lives in North Carolina. He's my
North Carolina. Okay.
Dude.
It's all about like using a tree, right? You can do like 50 workouts, like using a tree. So what are Pat McNamara's 3 reasons? There's only 3 reasons he'll tell you that you should work out and like stay in shape. Do you know his 3 reasons?
I have no idea. The man says so many things, but
the first is in order to save your own life.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that, right? And there may be some level of adrenaline, but am I able to run several miles if I have to run several miles? If I have to carry someone, do I have the physical ability to do that? The second reason is to save someone else's life, which kind of makes sense, right? And you guys see this all the time, right? Trying to extract people from cars or whatever, or you're inside of a burning building and trying to save people. But just as an average person, I was trying to think through these scenarios when I heard him talking about this. Like, could I do it?
Yeah.
Could I lift someone? Could I go up and down the stairs, whatever it might be? And the third reason is just kick someone's ass if you have to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Pat Mac, I mean, he's a bad dude, man. Yeah. He's a Delta Force guy. I mean, he's done and seen it all. So yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys, like, generally if he says something, I'll kind of like write it down or remember it, because I'm like, okay, like he's got a reason he's telling you that, and it's probably because he's done something and remembered that. But I mean, the first 2 reasons for sure. I mean, that's like at the fire department, in the last probably year or so, I mean, we've all kind of brought up some of our personal workout equipment to leave up there.
Yeah.
To just encourage people to try to work out and just be in shape. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just get people moving. But I mean, like you said, adrenaline only takes you so far. It's like a lot of people rely on that, or they think they're going to rely on that. But you can't, you can't outwork your body if it's failing or if it's not used to moving a certain weight or a certain load. At some point it's going to give in regardless of how much adrenaline you got going.
Well, And you don't know this yet because you're not in your mid 40s, but the thing that's inspiring about Pat's story is he was one of those kind of like a Goggins where he was 45 years old and drinking too much and spending too much time on the couch. And he said, what am I doing? And became more accountable, personally accountable for his life, and got into shape and, kind of transformed his career and kind of what he's doing now.
Yeah.
So that was inspiring for me, kind of being right at that age.
Yeah. He's getting it, man. He's older now, and he's still just jacked and in shape. So he posts his workouts. I see it on LinkedIn now, but he posts stuff on there, and does his like basic dude stuff on like Wednesdays or something that he puts out of just like basic tips for that people should know. He's got good stuff.
Well, let me show here this on the camera. Let me thank you for this coin.
Yeah.
The Harvest Fire and Rescue Command Challenge coin,
yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's pretty cool stuff there on the back. You got the Alabama flag, the U.S. flag. What else is there?
Yeah, it's like our scramble, so it's just like our logo. That's kind of what we have on like our polos. So like the front part is like our patch, and the back is like one of our just kind of other logos that we use.
And that's easier to see the whole
thing.
thing.
And that's our scramble on our patch. So yeah, but yeah, that's the challenge coin thing. Yeah, it's something that. I'll kind of credit myself with that for the department because it started after I got there. But that was something, that, I've got challenge coins, been giving them, just kind of over my years in the military. And so to me, that was always one of those things that was, to me, that was more important getting one of those than ever getting a medal or an award or something, getting a challenge coin that somebody's personally given you for something. So, we got those to pass out for guys. Typically, pass them out if we get saves or something on a full arrest. Or some kind of special honor, but yeah, definitely want to bring you one so you can display somewhere. So
no, I will. I'll start building that. Now that I'm using this other camera, I think I'll start using that desk space more to showcase things like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Any final thoughts from you? Any shout outs or?
I can't say it enough. People need to know how to do CPR, need to know how to work an AED, need to know how to stop major bleeds. It's something that, like we talked about, I've had to do in my personal life outside of being at the fire department, was caught in a situation. It's for everybody to know. And with DeMar Hamilton, the other night, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
I think even with Jeremy Renner, when he got in his accident, people were saying that his neighbor saved his life with a tourniquet. Not to toot my own horn, but that's things that I can teach people in. I can train people in that stuff. I'm certified to do those things. And that's something that as a department, we've got a program that's set up that we can train people that live or work in Harvest and those things through the department. If you're outside of Harvest, like I said, I can train people in those things as well. So people feel free to reach out or whatever. And I can't say enough. And that's something, as a first responder, sometimes you need an extra set of hands. You may be in a situation where you don't have another person there to help you. And if you've got a bystander that is actually trained and actually knows what they're doing, there's been plenty of times I've asked people to help me with something if I need it. So, it's a good way to be an asset to your community too.
Well, Andrew, was your given
just
name?
Drew. Just Drew.
Yeah,
okay.
So
just a Drew. Just
I'm glad
Drew.
I never went there then.
Yeah.
Drew. I love it.
Yeah, just a Drew.
Drew, I've it's been a pleasure, man, having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate. I can't remember if you reached out to me or Jessica hooked us up.
Yeah, I reached out to you.
You reached out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a good problem to have when you got a lot of people reaching out to you, and I get to a point where sometimes my mind just gets saturated.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure, man. I love learning about people. Certainly, I've known a few people in my life that were like EMTs, and every now and then someone just had an itch to get involved and may have been a volunteer firefighter. But I learned a lot just in doing some of the research and getting ready for you to come on.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you being transparent and sharing your story.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.